Watch us be uncivilized and clueless as we tap into our game knowledge. It's Jet Theory Radio. Live from the ATX, welcome to Jet Theory Radio. This is episode number 18. I am David, but you may know me better as the one they call Jetter. I want to thank you for tuning in and giving us an ear as we sit down. We talk with Steve Dunn this week, and we get a little bit on the nerdy, a little bit of the drinking side, little details of both, and then we end with some good rock and roll.
Nerding and drinking and music.
That's my life.
Yeah.
The entirety of my life summed up right there.
I believe the text message just was, what do you want to talk about? Beer, board games, rock and roll.
Right.
And there was just the emoji back.
Throw up the horns.
Yeah, throw up the horns emoji. Alrighty. As always, the man to my left, Mr. Gail Murrin.
Your shady justice, your voice of reason.
Your shady justice, your voice of reason. Do you want me to re-edit that for you? Would you like a second take?
No.
Because it didn't sound any way logical. It sounded like
Your
you're trying to break the
shady
fourth wall
justice.
to the people
Your
listening.
voice of reason.
I think he's trying to talk to your ears right now if you're listening on this. I apologize ahead of time for
Yes.
that because he can be confusing. Moving on away from him. Hey, Mr. Murrin, we started talking before we got the podcast going,
Yeah.
really. Like, okay, so this is going to be a weird edit I'll be doing. So we sat down and we're just sitting here at the bar.
So we're going to talk in references to things that we've already talked about, but it'll be before what it plays on the podcast. It'll be fun.
It's a very
we're gonna
Memento-esque way of approaching the podcast, you could say.
So essentially, I'm going to say, here's where we're going to break. And this is where you're going to hear what we talked about before this intro piece.
Why does it got to be right now?
Because I'm going to...
Why can't we do this part first and just mind mess with our viewers?
Because I want just a little bit of freaky flow into it.
I think it'd be fun.
Who needs continuity?
Because
right?
it's always better to have the intro, what you're going to talk about in the podcast beforehand. If we just go into it in conversation, that's really hard to get into.
No, I'm saying that, but then I'm saying this part happens first, and then we supplant.
That's
the first
what
part
I'm
of
doing.
Okay.
But
we should, in this next conversation.
It's like he doesn't even listen to me, and he's the one with the headphones in.
The fact that Gail started as the voice of reason was really kind of...
That was the telltale sign right there? Yeah.
That, this was coming right off the rails.
Yes, as it does every intro. Hey, welcome, the third voice, if you're wondering who that is. That's Mr. Steve Dunn. Steve, how's it going there for you today?
It's going really well. Thank you very much.
Cool here. Yeah, so it's weird to introduce you now, but we've already been talking, so we just...
spent an hour talking about shit.
So if you're curious for the topics and everything, we're going to get into discussion a little bit about beer, because certain people are branching out into that.
Yeah, we're moving into the beer, the professional, the pro level.
Pro level.
The end goal of any
Saint No homebrew nonsense.
Right.
Yeah, we're not talking. You just sit there, you got a homebrew, you got a little kegerator, and you got some friends over for a party. No, this is expand a little bit. You get a little more knowledge based on what you're doing, and you know, it's time to just level up.
Hopefully. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. Now, I'll have to say, I've been incredibly fortunate with how things have played, and so I'm just going to jump into this. So we're opening a brew pub. Mm-hmm. It's called the Brewtorium. My wife, I say we, the royal we. That's my wife and I, Christy, met through the local homebrew club, the Austin Zealots, another couple who had plans to start a brew pub. And Chris, our head brewer, incredibly talented, makes phenomenal beer. His wife Whitney, they're absolutely stellar people. They did not really, they had this plan to move forward, open a brew pub, and we were introduced kind of through the Zealots by another friend of ours, Dan, who is a another professional of a brewer at a couple different. He's been at 2 different breweries.
Yeah, but he's at
here in
Flying
Austin.
Man now.
So this will be his 3rd brewery in the Austin, Texas area. He was at Rogness, he was at Solid Rock, and now Flying Man. And he really, I think the timing was perfect. He pointed out that Chris and Whitney were looking at opening this brew pub. They hadn't really spent a lot of time. They haven't worked in the restaurant or bar industry. And both my wife and I, especially my wife, has spent a lot of time managing restaurants, and some really, some well-known names in the Austin area. And it was, I guess you could say, kind of kismet.
Oh yeah.
That we lined up the way we did, and it's been about a 2-year undertaking, journey to.
Wait, you're telling me this isn't just like, hey, 1 month we get this idea, we all get together, the next month it's all laid out? The plans just don't meld together like that?
Yeah, maybe if we were in a movie and we were doing that like 30-minute montage just before the end.
When you say you need a montage.
Yeah, exactly. No, this has been, Austin is a really, really hard market to open a business in. It's incredibly competitive from a real estate standpoint.
Oh yeah.
I read an article in the Austin Business Journal that talked about Austin real estate from a commercial standpoint being roughly 94 to 96% occupied on a month-to-month basis. So there is almost no available real estate available for small businesses to try and move into, unless you're going to get in bed with something like, oh, we're opening the Rock Rose in the Domain and we're putting all these great stuff. But now your cost, your square footage cost to get into that is astronomically high.
Pricey.
Right. So I think that we had, a couple, I don't want to say false starts, but we had a few locations we looked at and said, hey, this would really work for us. And it just didn't work out, on the back end. And the location that we have now, our lease is signed. We have
good step.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge part of it. We have a lot of construction happening. We're still kind of dealing with the city of Austin as far as getting permitting done, which is terrible,
excruciating.
Oh, it's painful. It's funny. I read an article yesterday, 2 days ago in the Austin Business Journal, and it was from the owner of Dan's Hamburgers, this kind of old Austin institution, been around forever.
Yeah.
The current owner in this article basically came out and said she will never open another restaurant within the city limits of Austin ever again.
Yeah.
Because she was doing a remodel on her business, and it took over a year to deal with all of the permitting and all of the crap that the city of Austin throws in your way. So, I mean, honestly, the feeling I think a lot of people get is if you're a small business, the city's, I don't want to say they're being deliberately adversarial, but they make things a little bit harder than it needs to be.
See, that's surprising me, because you would think like in a state that represents itself as being like a little bit more conservative and stuff like that in Texas, less regulations, let businesses do their sort of thing. You almost get the exact opposite when you're trying to start up a business with everything.
Remember, this is the Democratic city.
But even still, okay.
Houston, no, because Houston is different.
Oh no, that's absolutely true.
Houston is exactly what you just said.
If we were trying to open this business up in Houston, we'd have been done a year ago probably.
What are the differences between the two cities? Is it more like
zoning, code compliance? A perfect example is the amount of time that it took for us to get approval for our parking lot plan. Before anything was done interiorly, before any plans had been submitted for plumbing or electrical or mechanical, we had to get approval for a parking lot. And the parking lot, so the city in its infinite wisdom says, well, we're gonna say your parking lot size is dictated by the square footage of your business, which sort of makes sense. But if you came to the city and said, hey, the vast majority of our square footage is not dedicated to what is essentially retail use, their answer is, we don't care. You have X amount of square feet total. We don't care if you're using 10% of it for retail. We don't care if you're using 100% of retail. We're looking at the entirety of your space, and that is how many parking spots you have to have.
So how many parking spots do you have to have?
I think it's 104, 110-ish. Yeah. And part of that is because of location. Part of that's because of zoning. You know, if we were in more central Austin, where they're just that possibility doesn't exist. You have to bulldoze a building in order to build that parking lot.
Yeah.
You would get exemptions to that, but because of where we're located, the city said, no, you guys have to have this absolutely massive monstrosity of a parking lot. And I think that process took about 6 months to work through. 15 different signatures from different departments within the city of Austin had to sign off on this plan before it finally happened. And it was the most laborious and painful procedure we thought, and now we're actually trying to get the actual construction permits, and that's, you know.
I can see why trailer parks and food trailer parks like popped up around here.
Right.
Just from that alone, like it's just because you want to test out your product, make sure it's a good product before you actually go forth
Sure.
and have the main business there. That just seems. City of Austin building, I guess, aside with all that.
Well, I will say, I think the city's trying to address some of it because they have this whole new, the code next is what they're calling it, and they're revisiting code compliance and code issues for business construction within the city. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is, looking at some of the code next plans, that if these new plans were approved and put into place, we could have gotten by with a parking lot half the size of what we've been told to build, and that's currently being built. So I think they're trying maybe to address it, but until the code next plans are actually in place and done, then we won't know.
So it's a shorter time for you just to wait it, go ahead and move forward now, as opposed to just waiting it out. Then
no, because trying to wait it out now it becomes an issue of we have a lease signed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
we have a deadline as to when we have to start paying rent to our landlord, and so you can't keep the business pending indefinitely, because now we're just burning capital waiting for the city to make changes. Yeah. Now and I was kind of reminded, it's the thing that's been comedically frustrating to us when opening this is, normally most businesses or bar or restaurant owners would tell you that you go through a construction process, and the thing that is always held up is you're either waiting on your TABC licensing to be able to sell alcohol to consumers, or in the case of a brewery, whether you be production or brewpub, is your TTB licensing, which is the taxation side of production beer making. And normally you get done, construction is finished, you have your permits, you've got your certificate of occupancy, but you don't have a TABC permit, so you can't sell beer to the customers that are wanting to come in, or you can't make beer because you don't have your TTB. In our particular instance, this is dragged on, and this nonsense from the city has gone on so long that we have both our TTB permit and our TABC permit. So if we had a building, we could make beer and sell it to people.
next week, done.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it could be that quick. However,
Yeah.
City of Austin.
But you've been collaborating with people.
Yeah, so there's been a collaboration beer that was done with Adelbert's Brewery that I think turned out just amazingly well. There is a collaboration beer in the works currently with North by Northwest. That I don't have an exact timeline as to when that's going to be done. I think it's it's end of this month. So I mean, shoot, within a week.
Yeah, this
Ish.
I think this is going to be going on Sunday. So
Within
By the time this
2
is out,
or 3 days from the
Yeah.
podcast, you'll be able to hit up North by
Dr.
Northwest.
Rauschenstein.
Yeah, so it's a Roush style beer, which I think is really cool. You don't see a whole lot of those. It's called Dr. Rauschenstein, and this is a collaboration with Kevin at North by and Chris, our head brewer. Like I said, incredibly talented fella. And I think it'll be great. I think the Lightning Wizard that we did with Adelbert's came out incredibly well. So if you get a chance, please hit up North by Northwest and look for a little Dr. Rauschenstein.
now it's got your name out there. So like people in Brewtorium.
Right. The Brewtorium is the website. So we are a brew pub. There's a lot of production breweries that have opened recently in Austin, and it's fantastic. And it's interesting because some are operating under brewpub licensing to get around Texas and its hinky, weird beer laws. Hops and Grains is a perfect example. They're a production brewery, but they have a brewpub license. but we are going to have a full kitchen. We have a 10-barrel brew house. So all of our beers will be made on site. We're going to, of course, offer 15? I thought it was 10-barrel.
15.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I just paid the check
See-
for the bright tanks.
Okay.
Now this is funny because typically we got Mern as the fact checker here,
Yeah.
but there's somebody else.
Yeah,
Please
so-
step up to the mic.
So I have to say this
Hi there.
is my wife Christy, who is our general manager for the Brewtorium, and I personally would have sworn that it was a 10-barrel brew house we're putting in, but apparently it was a 15-barrel brew house.
Now, just to make sure, then, if you're off by those numbers, are the permit numbers also right on?
Okay. I corrected him.
see, I'm just the guy at the brewery that talks about what we're doing. I don't have too much.
All
to do
the
with this.
logistics, all those
those
details.
numbers. That's not my bag, man. Christy and Whitney, that's their thing. They are the queen of the numbers and the things. And Chris makes the tasty beer, and I just do.
Do we have a countdown then of the
Talkie.
number of days until like opening? Any details like that set, or is
So-
it?
September 1st.
Yeah, we're
We're shooting for.
Yeah,
Okay.
September is, again, it all comes down to permitting from the city. Now we have a temporary construction permit, so we started construction. And, if we can open in August, that'd be great, but September's probably much more realistic, but, first part of September.
Also with students.
Well, and we're hoping to capture some of that because of where we're located. We're directly across the street from the new ACC Highland campus. Our address is on Dillard Circle, but Airport Boulevard is the more common landmark that people in Austin will know. And so, we're hoping that we'll capture a little bit of, folks getting out of class that want to come over and have a bite to eat and have a drink. But I think we're really well centrally located.
What kind of like theme do you have going on? Is it like not? I'm like in theme, like I'm like talking like not a. Is it a sports bar kind of thing, or more like upscale-ish? Like what?
We're I think what we're looking for is, there will not be, we're not going to have any TVs.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so there won't be a TV screen anywhere in the restaurant. So
We will be bringing in TVs for special sporting events. We will also have private rooms, and we're hoping to capture a couple of like draft party type interest. If somebody wants to book a party to do their draft picks, we will have that available, and we'll have a screen in there for that.
right. I mean, I think that'll be more like a projector type thing, but it won't be available every day.
Yeah.
Because we want folks to be able to come in and enjoy the beer and enjoy the food and enjoy each other's company and not so much stare at whatever happens to be on football, basketball, baseball.
Kick it old school and actually talk with people, enjoy the
Right.
beer, enjoy the food. The food's going to be kind of a part of that slow food movement. So we're hoping to sell some of our grains to places like Johnson's Backyard Garden and Eden and some of the other local gardening places where we can trade out maybe spent grains as fertilizer and get back some greens that we can use in our kitchen for food. So we're hoping to go back old school on the whole concept.
Locally grown, locally just everything, just hey,
Everything
right here.
locally grown. We're local. We want to build a place where we would want to go eat and drink and hang out with our friends, and so that's what we're doing. That's what we're building.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think that's it's kind of the logical offshoot of the craft beer movement is as a craft brewer you're saying I'm making a beer that I'm either stylistically inspired by or I'm very passionate about, and I want to be able to deliver it to my friends and neighbors, and so I want to serve them good beer, I want to serve them good food, and I want to know where that stuff comes from. So if we can work out, we have deals set up with local purveyors to source all of our product, we're going to do that. I know we've had a conversation already with a maltster who will be able to provide some custom type grains that his entire business model is based on. He knows the farmers that are growing the grain, the entire channel of coming from the farm to the malt house to be made to the brew house to then be delivered to the end consumer, is very tightly controlled, and we know what happened at every step of that journey. Rather than just hey, this came off a refrigerated truck and now we're gonna make beer or food out.
Yeah, we just had the carts, just did a two-wheel and just pulled it right on up, and there you go.
Right.
So it's very similar to like a farm to table concept, but more farm to pint glass.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
And farm to table too.
right.
Yeah,
I think the goal is to be able to say we have farm to table out of the kitchen, we have farm to table out of the brewery. And we want to be really kind of wired in very tightly with that entire local chain.
And some of the things I think with the beer that's going to be hopefully local and or more southern is we're working with some of the more heat tolerant hops, which is huge. Hops has had a shortage lately. You can't grow them anywhere. Either they burn down or they get too cold, or
they get too hot,
and they get too hot and they shrink.
They get too dry. And
we've been really lucky lately. We have some at home that we've had for about 8 years now. Some Cascade, and I know that they're working in New Mexico, raising a lot of hops too. So we're hoping to get some of those things too, so we can be real southern.
See, I don't know if I know farm to table restaurants, stuff like that. I don't know too many. Is this like a more unique kind of concept around here for the Austin area? Like
no, it is not.
well,
I mean, it's new.
Everything like grown locally, done locally.
I mean, there's I think there's quite a few restaurants locally that are kind of leveraging it.
Yeah.
I think Odd Duck is a great example of that. I think that Barley Swine is a phenomenal example of
Justine's,
locally,
I believe.
Justine's, Foreign and Domestic. All of these guys, really work hard to work with local farms and local purveyors. Now, I can say I don't think anybody's doing it from a brew pub standpoint.
that's what I was getting to from
and
a brew pub standpoint.
So from a brew pub standpoint, I would have to say not really. I think
I could safely say probably no at this point. There's one maltster that works in the whole southern region, and he only will. He's in such high demand with all of the new breweries opening that he'll only do larger orders. So if you're a home brewer or if you're a smaller brewery, then
he's not gonna work with
you go in with other people to get a whole truckload of malts. But we, through friends and allies, other people, we've have met with a gentleman who malts in the South.
Well, that was I mean a very
Kismet.
very again the Kismet that got us started with the brewery got us started with this maltster. So it's kind of a cool story actually. My other job when I'm not thinking about making beer is
the pay bills job.
Yeah, the pay and bills job. I'm a nurse, so and I work in a cath lab in Round Rock, Texas. And one of our physicians had a friend from college that was in the coffee roasting business and had this kind of natural transition at some point where he moved out of the coffee roasting business and he worked for some pretty big names. I think he was with Intelligentsia,
which is a badass
yeah,
coffee.
they make absolutely incredible
roaster.
coffee. They do custom roast. And he moved into the malting business, and he's located in Denver. And one day, because of the nature of the work I do, we're cardiac specialized. I was spending about 5 hours in a cardiac cath lab with this physician. We just got to talking, and the brewery came up, and he just said, "Hey, one of my best friends from college makes custom malts. Do you want to talk to this guy?"
Interested? Hey, conversation.
And literally, and we were like, "Wow, that's kind of." And so, a few weeks later, he said, "Hey, my buddy's coming down to visit. Just hang out at the house. Do you guys want to meet up with them?" And we
the answer is yes.
Yeah, we were like, "Absolutely," and bring him over. And so we spent an afternoon chatting with this gentleman, and he got to try some of our beer. And he said, "Hey, I'm gonna send you guys some malts." and why don't you try my malt in your recipes and see how it comes out.
That's always a good sign. It's like, okay, yeah, I tasted this a little bit. You passed the taste interview. Time for the next step.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's graduate. Let's go ahead and move up. And so again, it was one of those. We were just incredibly fortunate. Right place, right time. It was the right place at right time to get in on this brewery getting started. Right place at right time to meet this guy doing malts. And so hopefully we'll continue to kind of have these happy sets of circumstances as we move into the business opening and bringing in patrons and getting
somebody will just show up to the pub and just be like, you know what, I like this stuff. Let's talk a little bit more. I got something. Maybe you can try this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just go from there.
And it's funny, it's I think that from a business standpoint, there's so much to be said for building that network. And growing it, because that's I think how businesses really do well. Is to say it's not just can I go out and buy this product, it's finding the right product that has the people selling you that product are passionate about their product in the way that you're passionate about yours.
Oh yeah,
and that's huge. It's such a big thing.
And if you just get on that same wavelength and things match up, you're it's golden. Then you've got that story to tell. Hey, yeah. The burger you're eating, it came from here. It did all this. The veggies like this. The beer, we can tell you came from here. Here's the path line. Here's how it ended up right here for you to enjoy.
Right. And honestly, I think that patrons, consumers are really looking for that. People aren't really interested anymore in just going and having a thing. They want to know. They're just as interested as consumers is to where everything that you're selling is coming from. What's your motivation behind it? Where did you buy it? How did it get here?
Well, it's a story, and people are really inclined, and they like the story. They like being the storyteller, being a part of that story, and just being able, like, you can then go and say, go tell all your friends and say, hey, I went to the Brewtorium. This is like where this beer came from, and then they've got it just keeps going and cycling on and on.
And in Austin, it's there's the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I think in Austin, there's always like the 1 degree of separation.
Yeah, definitely more like 1 or 2.
One or two. And so, when you say like, yes, we're going to have local chicken from Redbird. It's like, I know somebody who works at Redbird. That's a great product. Or, our pork, our sausages are going to be sourced locally. And they're big names. They're people that work. For those places. Hopefully we'll come in and eat our food, drink our beer, and just create this whole community. And that's another thing that we want to achieve is a sense of community.
Well, the high point of that is when you describe the restaurant itself not having TVs. It means you've got to sit down. You're essentially got to talk to each other, or you're going to sit there all alone and just mope.
Hopefully not.
Yes.
Well,
there'll be enough good beer and good company around.
Right. Hopefully enough beer will make you happy.
We'll have a couple of bar stools, and if you want to be alone, you can be alone and just talk with the bartender. But we're also, we love trestle tables, and we love the whole German beer hall style. Hey, let's cheers these people that we don't even know because we all like beer. Yay!
Well, you already get the overwhelming theme of community there. That it is so natural. You're not going to want to go there and just be by yourself. You're going to just suddenly join in, and it's going to be good times.
Absolutely. So, and I think that's one of the goals. And I know that personally speaking, Chrissy and I have established some really phenomenal relationships with people by going into a beer joint that has those large kind of communal tables, and you sit down and you're having a drink, and maybe it's just the two of us to start, and then we start talking to the people next to us, and now we have friends that we've known for 10 years. They were complete strangers. We just happened to sit down and have a beer with them, and I think that's what I'm really looking forward to see grow out of this, is to have people come in, and whether they sit down inside or whether they go sit in our beer garden outside, they bring their dogs, hang out, is they foster this sense of community, and it's not a bunch of strangers sitting at little tables having a drink with someone that they know, and they're ignoring everybody else around it, but they're part of this larger, more kind of really cool organic environment. And I think that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing happen.
Now I know we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but it's almost like if you're there on a Tinder date at the brew pub and things are going bad, hey, you just start talking to people next to you, and you don't know, you never know.
Swipe right. Yeah. We'll be your Tinder date. Brewtorium will be your Tinder date, and then if you find somebody else where there, we won't. We promise not to be jealous. Maybe a little. I don't know. There's no promises, but.
Well, if you leave early and not drink all the beer.
Well, that's true, right? I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see what happens with that.
That's still, I think that's a good idea. Just have the
I'm
Brewtorium have its own Tinder profile.
Yeah, we're totally making a Tinder profile because I mean, you think about it. You're going through. You're lonely. You need something to do. You keep swiping. No, and there's that beautiful glass of stout staring at you. You say, you know what? That's what I've been missing in my life, right there.
And the joy happens.
Right? Yeah.
The joy happens when you swipe right, and then it's a match, and you're like.
Right. And then you can come and you have the beer and you go, my God, it's as good as I thought it was going to be.
Yes.
There's no letdown in this.
No.
There's no disappointment. You're not getting stiff with the tab. I mean, you're just, it's everybody wins there.
Yeah.
Everybody
Everything
wins.
from that tall, dark, and handsome to that,
So that bouncy
hot blonde.
right. Yeah, well, we'll have all of that. Blondes, brunettes, redheads. Darks, lights, everything. We'll have
The
all
Irish
of it.
red, because we have to include people like Murrin.
Of course, right.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, I like that.
It's battle time.
Just
Sudden
say it,
pause.
Murrin. Just say it.
Are we
battle
going?
time.
We going there?
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
going there.
Time to
So
talk shit.
before we go there, this is where we'll actually cut. We'll put in the previous conversation.
Oh yeah, because there was a whole thing. There's a whole thing that happened because I started backwards. We can blame me for that.
Oh no, you're not to blame at all. That's what I like. That's why I start recording before we start officially recording, because when you sit down and you just start talking and it starts going.
Right,
Hey,
there it
enjoy.
is.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we'll cut to that.
I couldn't think of names for these. So I have a name for the peanut butter one. I just forgot it. And I can't find... Like, I know the recipe now, so I guess I lost the recipe paper. But I know
You don't use Beersmith?
No.
Jesus, what's wrong with you?
You know
Fuck
when,
off! Really?
Chris uses ethos.
Ethos? Is this...
Ethos.
Such a noob, Murrin. Such a noob.
See, I have my main version on the fucking computer, but this is fucking Beersmith. This is the database in which I keep all of my recipes stored, but more importantly, like when I pull up whatever, like let's say I'm doing my braggot, so here's my whole thing, but I put in my brew profile, so here's all my equipment, session data, target numbers, but then I can go into a timer, so it's a this will tell you everything. Like you say, I'm using this kind of equipment, so it says you need X amount of gallons of water to start your mash to hit your target temperature of 152 degrees on your mash, and then you run your timer for 60 or 90 minutes. And while you're doing that, then you get your strike water for your sparge at this temperature. So it gives you everything for the brew day. And so I just go down, I hit my target numbers, and I'm into the mash tun. I'm out of the mash tun. I'm sparging, and then I'm in my boil, and then I'm hitting my timing for my hops. And then, of course, I run a therminator, so everything gets chilled and into the fermenter, and I oxidate, pitch yeast, all that. This is everything. I mean, this is fucking... And it scales. You can go from extract to all grain, back to extract to fucking. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of software.
No one's
In fact,
ever taking my recipe.
You're not
It's
using. Well,
here.
that's fucking.
When you brew a
shut
bad
up.
batch of beer and it makes your brain go melty.
In 15 years, have yet to brew a bad batch
Yeah,
of beer.
well,
You've been brewing since the age of 21?
I'm going to call shenanigans on that. You're telling me you've never once had a sanitation
Okay,
issue
so
making a batch
13
of beer.
years. Huh?
You've never had a sanitation issue making beer.
No. Now I'm jinxing the fuck out of
Oh yeah,
myself
your
right
next
now
4 batches
by getting
are
cocky
fucked,
about that.
right?
Yeah.
They're just.
Don't get cocky, kid.
Yeah, your next batch will shit the bed. I'm just telling you that right now.
Now things haven't like tasted great, but that's more the recipe's fault necessarily.
Oh
than
yeah. And who designed the recipe?
yeah, me.
So,
No,
yeah,
that's right.
I got it all in my head.
I'll take that. When I was brewing with Will, we tried some pretty off the wall shit, and it was just like, that doesn't work.
I have found that with off the wall shit, that if you give it time and come back to it, it might turn into something.
Yeah.
Because
We
I
had
had
a cucumber one that turned into something. It was
yeah,
cucumber
I see
and
cucumber
peppers.
working.
It was a cucumber and pepper blonde, and the cucumber wasn't there, and it just the bottles got forgot about for like a year, and we came back to it. I was like, oh, cucumber, there you are, but it cut the pepper at that point.
Interesting.
So it
Yeah,
wasn't,
I had a heather ale that when it first came out of fermentation, it did a couple weeks in the keg. It was just confusing. Like it just I mean you didn't know what to make of it. It was like well it's because there was there was heather flowers and there was sweet gale in the recipe, and it was a little cloying, and the heather wasn't real there, and the malt profile was weird. And I literally took the keg, shoved it in the back of the kegerator, and forgot about it. And I came back 8 months later, and I hooked it up. And somewhere in the process, I don't know if it was, the gale had gone from this cloyingness to almost a Brettanomyces kind of tart, sour approach.
yeah.
And it turned into probably one of the best beers I've ever made. I mean, it was just. And it was one of those, like, I drank it, and I went, man, I really like this, but I don't know if anybody else in the world will like it. And I had a crawfish boil at the house, and a bunch of beer drinkers came over, like, people that really appreciate beer, and they tried it, and they went, oh, my God, oh, dude, this is amazing shit. And we killed all 5 gallons of it.
Well,
just
you remember
like
that sour I made the first crawfish?
Oh, yeah.
that everyone killed. That was also kind of accidental.
Yeah, happy accident, right.
Because, well, no, it was because I was putting off making it. So that the sour little granny apple thing that I used to make it sat for 7 months. But then when I tried to do it again, and I got to go fresh, blah, 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 put it in, nowhere near the sour flavoring.
Right.
So it was actually the sitting of the added ingredient that was necessary to make the beer the way it was.
Right.
So yeah, those
good.
are happy accidents.
Yeah. How'd Accidentally Good?
That was the name. Me and my friend, when I first started brewing, called ourselves Accidentally Good.
Nice.
Because we basically started brewing blind. Two young kids, and
But
just
it was
out of
like
college.
blueberry stuff. You guys were like, I remember.
Well, stouts and
Blueberry
stuff.
stuff.
It was just really off the wall, fruity kind of stuff like that, and I was just like, it just wasn't for me. But then eventually you start getting the good stuff.
Well, a stout isn't for you either. We were brewing stouts non-stop. It's our first coffee stout, actually, way back when. We had cheated by, at the very end, putting in a pot of Godiva chocolate coffee.
That's not cheating.
No, it was fucking
that's
fantastic, actually.
That's a perfectly legitimate. So I do a milk stout, and occasionally I do what you could call a coffee and cream stout.
Yeah.
And so you add your lactose into it and brew it as a regular milk stout. But then one of the options you can do is you cold brew a bunch of coffee, and as you go into fermentation and it's doing its thing, you just take your pot of cold brew coffee and just pour it right the fuck in there.
We waited till the yeast to be done making it, and just added the coffee afterwards.
Right.
Put it on carbonation, and it turned out to be one of the best stouts literally I've still ever made.
It's I don't think any of that's cheating. I hate it when somebody says, well, I cheated because I did this. No, you took your core, your base recipe, and you're always looking for that little tweak, that little thing that takes the beer to that kind of next level, that makes it stand out, not necessarily by reinventing the wheel and coming up with something completely different, but you're coming up with something that's a little bit unique.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of breweries, there's that fine line where you're either going with I'm making a really tried and true Pilsner, or I'm doing a blonde ale, or and I'm not trying to come up with something that hasn't been done before, but I'm trying to make something that's really, really hews closely to the stylistic expectations of the beer. Or you get guys like Jester King, or and I know there's a big stink about the cellar, but Wicked Weed was another great example where they said, hey, we're gonna do open top fermentation. We're gonna add weird shit like smoked figs and mushroom to our beers, and just really kind of go a little bit off kilter. And they've made really killer beers. But they, at the same time, they knew what they were doing. When you have a beer on your roster that's called Commercial Suicide, you know exactly what it is you're doing. You are not making beer for the average consumer. You're going off into the deep end a little bit, and you're making some kind of weird, different shit.
And when it hits with the right crowd, it's going to hit with the right crowd.
And
like
if
the experts that go around like judging it and rating it kind of thing, and they'll go around, they'll be like, yeah, this is something completely different, completely original, and it works.
Right.
It's not going to be for, Mr. Bud drinker all the time.
Absolutely not. And that's, you look at what happens when Jester King releases the Atria Rubicite and the lines that form at the brewery on those release days. Now you're talking, though, they're starting to generate the same kind of buzz that Three Floyds is doing with Dark Lord. So when they do a Dark Lord release day, they sell tickets to it, and there's a mile-long line, and it's a spectacle, and it's this thing that people just kind of go a little bit apeshit about. And so, I think it's awesome that a brewery can generate that kind of buzz, by making a beer that if you took into your average sports bar in the United States, you couldn't give it away.
Yeah.
People would not pay for that stuff. But then you get, those people that are, really kind of punched down or dialed into the craft beer scene, and they go, oh my God, this is phenomenal. So.
And you can make a living off of it.
Right.
Well, think of in Chicago, the only real beer that I knew that came out of Chicago was Not Your Father's Root Beer was the last big beer. Nothing, and that's just, it's a flavored kind of beer. Nothing really too special about it. That I could see how they come up with the different flavors and stuff around here, or the different styles. That to me it's something more commercial.
Well,
more broad.
and of course in Chicago, you had Goose Island back in the day. Now they've been bought out and they're now, part of the macro scene. But
And there's plenty of other small guys up there.
But I think that's the thing is craft beer is still in this very kind of raw. And it's funny, I hate to say it, but it's still incredibly underappreciated in the country. I just looked at the numbers the other day, and in Texas craft beer accounts for less than 1% of all beer sales in the state. 0.7%. But
accounts for 99% of the laws that are getting made.
Oh no, absolutely. And
beer.
that's because you have breweries that are either, you have the Free the Taps project that got started by Freetail down in San Antonio, which is the very first lobbying group that you've seen for craft beer in the state of Texas. And you have a coordinated and very directed group that's working to make legislative change in the state, which is huge. But you also, the other thing is happening is you're seeing the lawsuits that are being brought against the TABC in the state of Texas by breweries, Real Ale. So these guys where they're suing the state and they're saying, hey, look, Deep Ellum's got a lawsuit going on right now, specifically related to the ability to sell beer to end consumers out of your tap room. That's huge. The distributors, that middle tier in this 3-tier distribution model that we have, they're opposed to it. Now they'll tell you it's because, after the prohibition was repealed, 25th Amendment came out, they said, hey, look, we're,
it's here to regulate.
Well, what they said, this is a states levels decision. The federal government is going to take no part in this, and so we're going to let the states regulate how beer gets distributed on a case-by-case basis in all of those states. And so the bill that was voted down in this legislative session that would have allowed breweries to sell to the end consumer directly, exactly like Texas wineries and Texas distilleries can do, which is, think about it. Wine is one thing, but you can go to a distillery in Texas. You can go to Garrison Brothers or Treaty Oak, and you can buy a bottle of liquor directly from them.
Here's one of the best ones. It's a bottle I don't... is it still sitting up there? No, I don't have it. But there is a little group of it's Distillery, Revolution Spirits, Last Stand Brewing, and Argus Cidery.
Yeah.
You can buy everything you want from Revolution. Not 50 feet away at Last Stand, you can't buy the beer from them.
Right, and you can't buy the cider from Argus. Actually, I think you can with Argus because cider's handled
Cider's
differently in the
different,
state.
man.
It's
Cider's more
considered
like a
a wine.
wine.
Right, wine and mead. Yeah.
So they're
Wait.
I can't explain that. I can't explain it. So in Texas, cider is considered more like a wine than it is a beer, even though the process isn't that terribly different.
Is it just the fact that there's more of a fruity kind of flavor or something like that?
I think one of the things that the legislator looks at is the process, because remember in Texas when it came to labeling, there was a difference between ales and beers. You know, there was is it under 3.5%? Is it greater than 3.5%?
Yeah.
Is it an ale? And so they really made these distinctions on you know, is it an ale? Is it a lager? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, from a brewing standpoint, is it? Am I using ale yeast or am I using lager yeast? You know, I mean, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
The end result is I'm still making beer, but the state really wanted to differentiate based on that. And for some reason, cider and mead they decided is more like a wine, and how you can handle wine sales versus beer.
There had to have been some company out there, like whoever was the beer big distributors at the time, wanted that distinction because they wanted their product either outside the legislation or inside the legislation. That's the only thing I
it feels
could
actually
think
more
of.
like a distribution choice to get more tax money out of certain things.
Well, except you have to realize cider is a very new product in the market.
Exactly.
In the
So it may
grand
not have
scheme of
been
things, I mean, this is
part of that
one of those
decision.
where you know, your cider choices for the longest time were always going to be imports. You didn't have an American-made cider for the longest time. I mean, you could get your Strongbow and things like that out of England, but domestically, nobody was really producing stuff. And then, you know, Woodchuck started to happen, and they gained a nationwide distribution.
Yeah.
And now you're starting to see, you know, you've got Austin East Cider, you've got Argus, you've got all these Texas cideries that are starting to pop up. And it's kind of weird how they're being plugged into the distribution model.
Yeah.
You know, it's
They had an advantage by coming in late and knowing where to go to be.
because people didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. And
Maybe
to
that,
take
yeah.
advantage of going into the right way to get what they want out of it.
To be able to just have that direct to consumer kind of.
Yeah. So they knew the rules going in, whereas beer kind of got it placed on it.
Well, and you know, beer nationwide, and especially in Texas. So Texas is the only state in the entire nation right now in which a brewery or brew pub cannot directly sell to end consumers for them to take beer home and consume. Out of 50 states, we're the only one. And it's mind-boggling. One of the problems you're running into is that in this three-tier system, you know, you've got your large macro brews, SABMiller, Coors, AB InBev, you know, these massive conglomerates. And then you get down to the next tier in the chain, which is your distribution model. And the distribution model is unfairly stacked against craft breweries because if you're an AB InBev distributor, you only distribute beers from their portfolio. Now, they're going to say it's not a violation of any kind of RICO statutes or a monopolization of the distribution chain because you have such a broad palette. You know, before InBev bought Anheuser-Busch, they had 80 labels. Anheuser-Busch owned 80 different beer labels. You know, aside from Budweiser, they you know, St. Pauli Girls and Boddingtons, all these things.
And that's why. So then they goes one step further. So then it's them, because they have so many beers available from the distributor, that distributor, by the way, it's not Budweiser making your retail spots plan. It's a distributor making the plan. We'll do this for you at our cost. Well, guess what? For doing that, guess what's going to go in what location? Get what's going to go right at your eye level.
So-
Guess what's
so-
going to go.
The distributors, and so when you think about it, even, you know, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but if, let's just hypothetically say that the distribution chain is an even split 50-50 between the AB InBev distributors and the SABMiller Coors distributors, or everybody else, if you will. The AB InBev guys are doing that very thing. They're going into your grocery stores and your liquor stores, and they're saying, hey, we'll, print up whatever you need printed up, and we're going to organize your shelf space. And so they put their stuff, because, I mean, there's decades of data on shopping habits of people in the country, and so they know people look at this shelf height.
Yeah, this
They
eye
look
level.
at- right, and so they all of their beers are put in those places, and so when a small time distributor comes in with a craft beer or something else, it's like, well, you guys can have that, that bottom
Yeah.
right hand corner underneath the Bloody Mary mix.
Yeah,
That's all you've got left.
exactly. And then a beer, which you think of like I love this one when Budweiser Select came out. The Select was never really made to win over a market. It was made to take the space for other beers
Right.
that would win if they had that space. So that's, I would say 25% of Budweiser's line is dedicated to pushing other people out of shelf space.
That's been part of their method when it came to dealing initially with craft beer was when you had a beer being released in a market, in a local market. I can't remember. There's actually a really, really great movie about this called Beer Wars.
Yep.
And in this movie, there's a beer, and I want to say it was called something like Moonshot. And it was being released in a very limited domestic market up on the East Coast. And Anheuser-Busch, this is before the InBev purchase, came out with a beer that had the same kind of ingredient components. It had the same kind of packaging to it. I mean, it was, if you look at the two things together, you would think that they were almost indistinguishable. And they went and put them in stores where this craft beer was being distributed to directly compete against it. And InBev is
negate their sales.
they're playing the long game, and they have the pockets that are deep enough to do this. They figure, if we can make you expend what limited capital you have trying to get your beer to market, and then we stifle you where the end consumers can see it, well, you're probably going to go belly up before we are. And so they retain that piece of market share. The other thing they do is they love to throw out those frivolous lawsuits.
Yeah.
They're famous.
The
for
famous one is the Dogfish Ale lawsuit,
that.
where
the pumpkin,
the pumpkin.
ale. Yes. Yeah.
It's too common of a name for a beer. That's what they sued them for.
Right.
The name is too common.
And they knew that they would lose in a court, but what they were wanting to do was force Dogfish Head to expend capital to defend it, because they figure you guys aren't going to have deep enough pockets. You're talking about a company that before their merger with InBev spent somewhere around $400 million annually on advertising, not even counting their lobbying money. They've got money to burn. So if it's like, well, it's going to cost us $100,000, $200,000 to fiddle with this frivolous lawsuit. Well, we know that little guy doesn't have that kind of money. These guys are, we're talking Dogfish Head at the time. They were operating on a shoestring budget. They had
Just
put
expanded.
a second mortgage on Sam Caglione. Put a second mortgage on his house. I mean, it was one of those things where they knew it's like, man, we're just going to try and run you out of cash. And they're doing all of this because you're seeing a shift in the consumption, the demographics of beer consumption in America. There are now, I think there's now just over 5,000 breweries
That's why
open in the United States.
They've changed their plan. I mean, I don't think the lawsuits are necessarily happening. You don't really hear about the lawsuits anymore because the lawsuits are probably bad press.
Right.
It's really a bad idea.
Not so much bad press. It's just after a while you can devote your money toward that, or
they're putting their money towards buying actual breweries now.
Ten Oak, Carbach, Elysium,
Wicked
Wicked Weed, all of these breweries that are picking it, they had significant market share, they had great buzz, they were delivering consistent, really, really good products. And Anheuser-Busch is, they look at this as we're losing ground monetarily to craft beer.
Slowly, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you don't
No,
see
but
not really slowly. I mean,
that's their biggest worry.
This is ramped up very quickly, and so I think
Well, I guess
the
in the
last
national scheme of beer.
well, but the last numbers that I think somebody looked at is the macro breweries have lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 million barrels annually to craft beer. That's a significant amount of beer, and it's funny. It sounds 25 million barrels, man. That's 50 million kegs worth of beer, if you will, and yet it's a drop in the bucket in the scheme of how much
10%.
beer
Yeah.
is being consumed.
But it's enough of an
nationally.
impact where if they they figure they don't want to lose ground now, keep essentially the monopoly about
Well,
their
10%
kind of beer
is some
versus-
CEO's bonus.
Right, right.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, and they're always targeting future consumers. The expanding your market. What can we do to
They bought a
solidify
town,
our base?
remember?
Yeah, I mean it's whatever they can do to keep people drinking their product and try and downplay craft. And I think it's a beautiful thing that people generally are becoming more motivated to seek out new beer, try new beer. I know whenever I have to travel with work, I just came back from Minneapolis,
I
and
love there's some good ones up there.
everything I did was when I was like, okay, I'm going to Minneapolis, so I'm gonna hit I'm gonna, let's say, oh yeah, I got to pay a visit to Surly because they're kind of the flagship. But then I found all these other great breweries, Dangerous Mind, not Dangerous Mind, Wild Mind, Dangerous Man, all these other great breweries that are up there that are delivering incredible, really, really well done beer, and yet they're still, it's kind of a drop in the proverbial bucket of the beer scene nationally. But more and more people, when they travel, or when you go to a bar, folks will sit down and say, "Well, what do you have that's local?"
Yeah.
They want to try your local beer. They want to see what you guys are doing.
It's analogous a little bit to like food. Like you can get your McDonald's everywhere,
Right.
But hey, when you're local, what's here?
Well,
what's,
also
what's something?
look at your airport now. Your airport definitely has some kind of bar in it. It's at least got 10 to 20 taps on it. A quarter of those taps or more are going to be their local stuff.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I was gonna say,
But every airport I'm now seeing and I'm flying into, and I'm walking by, oh, hey, that's the one. And it's always packed.
Right.
And that's just kind of what we're seeing. I mean, it is this little travelers want that local. They've always wanted that locals, but they want. Well, I had this dish somewhere. I mean, it started with food, really, probably,
Sure.
and now it's. Well, I've had this beer.
I think I could potentially argue that the reason why you're seeing that in airports and with travelers, because generally the folks that are traveling are probably your people that are going to be more interested in craft beer and unique regional foods than your folks that just never really leave the old hometown, and a busy night out is them going to hitting the local Olive Garden or the sports bar and drinking their Bud Lights.
Yeah.
And I mean, because think about it. We're talking about there's a pretty good percentage of the population that I mean,
This is their
I can
routine.
personally speak from having grown up in a small town in West Texas, that I have friends that I went to middle school and high school with that they're still there, and they're
Same
probably
thing.
never gonna leave.
Yeah.
So I think for craft brewing there is we have, obviously in Texas we have significant legislative hurdles to overcome. And some of those legislative hurdles are going to be very difficult to overcome because we are fighting against the influence of macro breweries and their deep pockets. And we also have an educational issue that we have to overcome, because if you think about all of the breweries that we know, I mean, what are there, 20, 25 breweries just in the Austin, Texas area?
Yes.
Easy.
And Texas craft beer accounts for 0.7% of all beers sold in the state. And so if you think about all of the breweries in Texas, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, I mean, there's a craft brewery in Abilene, Texas, population barely 100,000 people. And they have one, tried and true, Pappy Slocum is a craft brewery there. And they make really good beer. And I mean, you're definitely not going to find their beer outside of Abilene. It's just you've got this uphill battle.
Yeah. It's
To
a huge
educate
uphill
people,
battle.
and it's not that
But
I
it's
think it's a
starting.
measure of exposure. Well, it's starting. It's got to start somewhere. But So we have, two different things we have to overcome: the macrobreweries and lack of exposure.
So you ready to battle out?
Yeah, we're ready to battle.
I'm ready.
Ready to battle out.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
Absolutely.
This time through, we're going to be talking some games. Family friendly, not so family friendly. Some geekier, some non-geekier stuff. Sit down and you want to play a game. And for this, we decided we're going to go a couple different fights. First one here, we're just going to talk about classic games. We did an arbitrary date of pre-1980 games.
Yeah, because there was a rush of game. I like actually that you said 1980. So when I looked this up, apparently like a boon happened about 1980.
Oh yeah.
Which we'll get to what my game is, which because it was released in 1981, kind of it sparked it. And I look at it and it's like, well, I want this game. No, 1980. 1985.
Well, and I was about to say, I would say between 1981 and 1985, the number of absolutely stellar board games that were released domestically by Milton Bradley, Avalon Hill, companies like that, it was staggering. I mean, because I did a little research myself for this, and I was thinking, I could do this game, and I'm like, no, that was 1982. Oh no, that was 1984. That was 87.
Yeah.
And I was like, my God, there's so many.
We will have to revisit this conversation and just pick the best game of the 1980s, the decade of the 80s.
Narrow it down to just that.
Talk about it. That is almost, that's like Everest-like in trying to do. I think we could almost do the best game of 1982 or the best game of 1984.
Could you do a best game publisher, perhaps? Was it consistent with publisher?
1980s, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That'd be a tough one.
I will tell you personally. I know we can save this for another episode, but I think it's going to come down to Milton Bradley or Avalon Hill. One of the two. It's going to come down to those. Personally, that's for me.
1985 Fireball Island.
Oh, hey,
classic.
Hey,
okay.
Let's not discount Dark Tower.
Yeah, Dark Tower.
Talk
as well.
about the game that you had to have.
Yeah.
Was Dark Tower. I mean, that was.
Was 1982?
That was 84.
84?
84 was Dark Tower. Yeah.
All these good games,
I know.
and not even the ones we're going to talk about.
I know,
first.
and none of those are on our list.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so starting off, first round, we each picked a classic board game. So like I said, pre-1980, whatever game you like. So we're just going to go around here first, just introduce our game, talk about it a little bit if we want, and then after all that, we'll fight. So for my pick, I chose a family classic of mine, Monopoly. And I really don't think you need to know much about Monopoly. You say Monopoly and everybody gets it. They know and understand it.
It's freaking Monopoly.
Yeah.
Right.
Longest game ever on record was 28 days or something like that for a while in the game, the Guinness Book of World Records.
Who the hell would want to play Monopoly for 28 days?
I don't know. They are obviously playing it wrong.
I mean, my God.
Yeah, and I'm talking just straight out classic Monopoly with all the original tokens and pieces. None of the gold, none of the electronic banking, none of that fast
I'm
dice.
thinking an 8 to 10 hour game of Twilight Imperium is like a slog for to play Monopoly for a month. I think I would just rather dance in traffic.
See, and I want to research it a little bit more on the 28 days. Like, did they just like start at 6 a.m. and end at like 6 o'clock at night, or was it like the full day and they like took cat naps in between?
Or did they just like play for 30 minutes and then come back to it?
Yeah,
because I guess that's an option too.
I don't know why that you can't get much done. Well, you can get a lot done when I play it, because me and my family, and the reason why I love this game so much is in a family with 4 kids, my 2 brothers and sister, we would sit there and we got Monopoly down to just a skill set. And I think Gail saw this the other day when we were playing with some friends. You roll the dice and I'd be able to tell you, you're here now. Just instantly right away.
Right.
And okay, it's this much for houses. You got, where you at? What you rolling?
Yeah.
Like I knew it.
So we played to reference this, the Rick and Morty version.
Okay.
Which is fun.
Yes.
It's Rick and Morty. And clearly the winner was Jetter, and clearly he has played Monopoly entirely too many times, which is why he's probably picking this option. Right. It was like, oh, that's really creepy that you know all of this.
No, I get it. There's a game that'll never be played again in my household because that was my game, and it's a game that was going to be on my list that didn't make it because of the cutoff, but that was Axis and Allies. And I can't tell you probably how many hundreds of hours I've sunk into it, but I have I think it's the 40th anniversary edition of Axis and Allies. It's the one that came in the large, like, super sized box.
That box.
Yeah, it's in immaculate condition because it's only been played once.
Never again.
And, right, and that's my wife saying never again because I got this game as a gift from a friend on Board Game Geek, and I broke it out. I was like, my God, this thing is glorious. I set it up, and it was myself, my wife, my son Troy, and our good friend Kenan. And so it's 4 is an odd number to play Axis and Allies with. It's, you either do it with a 2-player or you could do a 5-player. And I said, tell you what, guys, I will play the Axis by myself. I will play Germany, Japan, and Italy on my own, and you guys, you 3 take the Allies, and we'll just play and we'll see how it turns out. And that, like, inner 13-year-old Steve kind of popped out after hundreds of hours of playing this, and it was an absolute decimation. My son was playing Russia, and I blitzkrieged him, and they were done in, like, turn 2. And my wife actually held me off for 4 whole turns as Britain, and then it was just down to the Axis versus America, because that battle hadn't developed yet. And yeah, at one point, Christy looked at me and she said, I will never play this fucking game again. And
The telltale sign.
yeah, I mean, that's
That you
so,
know
so
what you're talking about.
I know. When Gail tells me that Jetter has this, preternatural kind of ability to just say, well, the optimal move would have been to go into this space and build a hotel for, I get it.
Oh, yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
You've got your sympathy.
Mr. Murray.
So my choices were, we're just going with the pre one, right?
Yeah, just
classic.
just classic.
So I went with Clue. I don't think I need to explain much of Clue either. I mean, there's been a movie made about it.
Loosely based on, actually, probably the
Loosely based on
best
it.
board game based movie ever.
I would have to agree with that.
Definitely beat out Battleship.
Was it even in the running? I mean, I realized that it was made, and they said it was sort of based off the. I don't remember in my games of Battleship there being aliens or invisible force fields or Rihanna, but I mean, I'm kind of But I mean, we had a movie called Clue, and it had Tim Curry in it, so automatic win right there, right? Yeah.
So,
Wasn't the movie written by the SNL writers of the time or something like that?
I'm not 100% on that.
I forget. Yeah, look up the information for that movie, because there was something weird about that. Like SNL writers or somebody wrote that, and it was odd. It was some odd pairing. I forget why.
so you can move on to your choices.
Okay. So my choices is something that I guess some of your older kind of the grognards, as we like to say, the old school veteran gamers are going to be familiar with, but probably not too many of the newer gamers, and that's Civilization. And we're not talking about the Sid Meier's Civilization video game, which he swears wasn't influenced by this board game, but I think he's lying.
There's a few similarities.
Well, I'd say there's more than a few. So we're talking. So this board game, when it came out, and this is when you had Avalon Hill and SSI were some of your bigger publishers, and so they had what was called the Bookshelf series games, Panzer General, Panzer Brigadier, your real hardcore war games were kind of the big, War of the Roses, some of your big flavors. And so Civilization came out, and it was really a very interesting concept because now we're looking at a game that could play up to 8 people, which was uncommon. Most of your board games were 2 to 4. Well, at that time, not even 6. Now things like Monopoly or Clue or Life, sure you
Risk.
can play more, but Risk was really I think shined at 4. But so Civilization was designed to be played with 8. And Civilization had some really, I think, some interesting concepts because you were taking your civilization and trying to advance it from somewhere around 3000 BC, and the game ended when somebody hit a technology level of about 250 BC. So this game was the first game ever to introduce a technology tree, which you didn't see anywhere else. And so when you look at other board games that have done it, or more importantly, other video games and look at not just Sid Meier's Civilization, but Age of Mythology, Cleopatra, all of these video games that are designed around this. Your civilization can't advance until you've discovered coinage, you writing, making sails, things like that, and as you
Toiletry.
sure, basic hygiene,
Basic plumbing.
right. And but as you learn, or your civilization discovers these new things, then you can advance into the next age. So it had a really interesting mechanic in the tech tree. The other thing that was interesting about it was this was a competitive game that was also cooperative. So it introduced it. So you could attempt to grow your civilization independently of what any other player on the board was doing, but at some point, because of the restrictions built into the map, you were either going to have to attempt to take over territory militarily and go to war, or you were going to have to come up with some kind of diplomatic means to growing your civilization. The third aspect is the trade side of it. It introduced resources, and you had multiple resources: salt, clay, hides, papyrus, things like that. That you needed a certain amount of each of these things in order to buy an advancement on the tech tree to grow your civilization. So you drew cards and had a hand, and you were hoping maybe to draw the right things, but then they introduced calamities into it. So you had cards that were, I have a volcano erupting, I have a flood, I have a plague of locusts. But because they introduced this mechanic in which you attempted to work with other players, I could look at Gale and say, hey, I need 3 papyrus, and I'm willing to trade you 2 salt and a clay.
And then it'd be up to you if you want to help save the civilization.
But more importantly, I only had to tell the truth about one of the 3 cards I was going to trade to him. So I might tell him, hey, I'm going to give you 2 salt and 1 clay, and the reality is I'm giving you 1 clay, 1 volcano, and 1 plague of locusts. So there becomes that, am I being honest? Am I trading fair with you, or am I trying to stick it to you? And they made it to where you wanted to trade, because the more of a resource that you had, let's say salt, salt was worth 3 points. If I had 2, now they were worth 12. If I had 3 salt, they were worth 27 points. So Gale might have looked and said, man, I've already got 1 salt card in my hand. He's going to give me 2. Holy crap, I've got a ton of victory points here. And so there was incentive to trade with people. And if trade didn't work, then you could, fall on your, let's pull out the swords and the archers and try and take over the city. So that there was a lot of really interesting dynamics that were taking place in this game that you did not see at the time. The games that you could play at the time were much more kind of old school hex-based, war games. And so I think Civilization introduced a lot of really fascinating concepts that have since branched out into both video games and current board game design.
I could definitely see it in the video game side of things. Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, the tech tree thing, I don't know. I mean, how many video games I've played where the tech tree is a integral part of how you play that game.
I mean, how integral is it's the lying to another person, but also then having to trust the other person.
Sure.
And look at all of the most recent games coming out. It's things like, it's playing off the decisions that you get to make.
Right.
And that is kind of where that actually started.
Absolutely. And so it's,
Playing off, you say that's such a general thing. You're playing off the decisions you make.
well, so
No, but decisions like, so am I going to trust you, or can I not trust you?
right. I think
that is such a huge.
I think that was ultimately expressed in Diplomacy, which was the ultimate game of backstabbing in the 1980s, 1990s when that game came out. I mean, that game was absolutely savage.
What Civilization? I guess maybe there's only one other possible game that could have done it first, really, and that was Risk. And that was, I won't attack your border if you don't attack me, and we're gonna go
Sure.
do this over
Right,
here,
right,
and then
right.
couldn't
That's
trust
where you get like just certain
and-
elements of
Yeah, but
civilization.
exactly.
There's a
but
few
that's
more.
where this is all starting, and now there's entire games now based off that.
Right. The entire mechanic of the game is, can I trust you?
Or
Should I trust you? Should you trust me? You know, who's lying to who right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was the beautiful thing. And so I think Civilization, even today, still can scratch a lot of different itches. You know, there's some people that are very much into the Euro style of board games, which is I'm trying to grow a civilization. I'm trying to, you know, the people that are into things like Agricola or Power Grid, things like that, where I'm trying to play
Build.
by placing my counters or tokens and making the most optimal move in this turn that is going to affect me 6 or 7 turns from now when the game ends. I think that it appeals to those players that are like, oh, fuck your optimal move. I'm just going to jam my army into your city, burn the place down, sack it, and take over your territories. And then I think it appeals to those people that want to be a little more twisty, and they're going to say, hey, let's trade. You know, Jenner, I'm going to give you these great cards, man, and you're going to be able to do this, and I'm going to be able to do that. And, buddy, you can really trust me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Aw.
Right. Surprise. And so I think Civilization did a lot of things really, really well. And it was very innovative for the time. You know, in 1980, nobody was making a game like that.
True. And before we get into the debate of it all, did you research the Clue movie?
Yes.
And?
Jonathan Landis and Jonathan Lynn.
Oh, Landis wrote it.
Landis.
Okay, that's surprising.
Yeah.
So actually a little bit better quality maybe than the Saturday Night
Right,
Live.
absolutely.
At the time.
Absolutely.
I thought it was somebody. Maybe that's why it stuck in my brain, the Landis name. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, then, I'd say in terms of classic board games, yours is a really good precursor for a lot more modern games.
Absolutely.
Would be the only because and this is just to help boost mine a little bit better. When I think of like classic games, I think of like something that's very, very simple, very not family friendly to a certain degree, simplistic on the rules enough to where. And shut up, Murrin. Shut up.
Everything you're saying is my
I know.
game.
Simplistic on the rules enough so that way everybody gets it. Because you have that base then of a board game where it pulls in a mass amount of people. Whereas Civilization is sort of getting into a little bit of that specialized kind of area where you really got to devote more time to it.
But so what are we trying to determine value or worthiness of a game based on its more pedestrian appeal?
All.
Or are we?
I think we're trying to do all.
Okay, so but I'm gonna say that's I don't like that all category because now we're talking about our future games, the ones we haven't gotten to yet, are very much games that appeal to a very specific segment of society.
Well, that's what future games
are,
I think
which
are.
are gamers.
I think that's the big
no,
difference
okay,
between the
but
classic game and the future game.
I'm going to disagree with that because I think that you can have quite a few classic games that appeal to a broad, group of people. I mean, if you're going to say that a classic game that is really tops, that appeals to a broad group of people, that has maybe a little bit of strategy, maybe a little bit of randomness, well, then, we should have just gone with fucking Life.
That's
know,
my
I've
vote.
actually thought about that.
That
was on my list to talk
a
about.
completely pedestrian game.
Yep.
I mean, we could talk about Uncle Wiggly. We could talk about
Well, yeah,
all
but
kinds of.
but we really can't discount any of that because we can't leave really anything off the table.
No, I'm not saying we should leave it off the table, but I think that if we're going to say that a game has a certain level of appeal because it appeals to a broad base of people, and that's what makes it attractive. I'm going to say that my issue with both Monopoly and Clue is those are games that people will play and they will never touch any other kind of board game. They would never play Civilization. They might not ever play Risk. Those are not games that are going to set the hook for you to want to investigate other games that are going to get you deeper into the hobby.
I was waiting for that.
Those are just they're like that. Oh, grandma and grandpa have come to visit, and the aunt and uncles, everybody's here for Thanksgiving. What do we do with a crowd of people? Well, fuck it, let's break out Monopoly or Trivial Pursuit or Clue or something, because it's friendly and mostly non-confrontational, and we'll just kind of do some things, and that's fine. Whereas Civilization, somebody might play that and go, man, I really like this particular aspect of it, whether it be the confrontation side, whether it be the trade side, and then another person could look and say, oh, well, if you like that, well, then you need to play this. And now you were talking about games that we're only going to find in your friendly local gaming shop, or from someplace like Board Game Geek. So are we?
I would say going along with your Monopoly appeals differently than Clue, simply because there's a little bit more complication in Monopoly than Clue. I mean, if we're talking about like simplicity, where like grandma and grandpa are breaking it out of any of the game here,
he gets about Monopoly.
Right.
There are
Clue.
That is.
Plus, growing up on Monopoly, my family also did Risk. We also we broke out a whole bunch of board games.
Now let's talk about the strategy behind really doing well at something like Monopoly. Ultimately boils down to how lucky were you with your dice rolls? Did I roll the dice well enough the first time that I landed on a space where I could build a house or a hotel or something that I can then profit from other people's poor dice rolls in the future? And I'm not saying that I've got a problem with games that are random and have a huge bucket full of dice, but those games I prefer to be really thematically heavy, something like Talisman or something like that, where there's a whole lot more going on.
Risk. I mean,
Clue. Sure. Well, no,
Like
because
Clue?
Clue,
No.
there's not even, you don't even have that random kind of element of dice rolling in Clue. There's, okay, we're trying to find out who whacked Granny over the head with the lead pipe in the study.
Mustard
I'm just saying, I think that Monopoly is a better game, sort of from a strategic sense, than Clue. But I'm gonna say that Monopoly has. We're talking a candle to a lighthouse comparatively when you're looking at Civilization, because Civilization is, it's meaty, it's heavy, it's thematic, it's strategic. There's so much going on, and there's so many different facets to it.
Oh yeah, for game mechanics, definitely. Monopoly doesn't, unless you get into like the serious house rules. Monopoly doesn't have that kind of like game mechanics.
But now we're talking about rewriting rules to make.
I'm not going into that part. Yeah. I'm just talking like basic Monopoly kind of thing. Because if we got into house rules for games, that'd be.
Right now we're just talking about new games.
Yeah,
we're talking about something completely different.
I guess it's, sometimes I think it's what you want out of the game. No offense, Jeddah. But I think things like Civilization or games like Clue, they really got your imagination flowing. Like, you look at the board and you imagine like, oh, I want to take that secret exit out of the kitchen and then pop up in the foyer, and then I'm going to catch the killer or whatever. Or things like Civilization too. They you really make your character in your head, and you can really you can envision your whole tree or what you want to accomplish out of the game. It's more in your head and not just something on the board that you have to follow, which was always something that I liked when I was playing board games. Because we definitely grew up with a lot of board games.
I would say in that aspect, and talking about like sparking your imagination, Monopoly can do that in a financial sense, make you reach out.
Hilton.
Wow. And Monopoly is out of the running, ladies and gentlemen.
You just got hit with a Paris Hilton attack. How do you defend?
That's a sneak attack from like.
Whoa. So and I would think this is something I'm gonna point out as one of Monopoly's most glaring weaknesses and most fatal weaknesses is how many times has that game been reskinned? you guys just played a Rick and Morty Monopoly, and there's a Star Wars Monopoly, and a Lego Monopoly, and a Batman Monopoly, and all of it.
Clue's the same way.
But I would like to point out that with Monopoly, we put a new logo on it, we put a new thing on it, but fundamentally it does absolutely nothing to change the gameplay. It's just, instead of building hotels, I'm building whatever. But it has no bearing on gameplay. It's window dressing.
Oh, have you noticed
Right.
how much more sexy Miss Plum has gotten
Well-
in Clue?
Well,
Is it Miss
okay,
Plum?
but at the same time, I would like to say with Clue, and I think the your statement about the imagination of trying to be creative and deduce what has happened in Clue is a completely valid point, and it fires the imagination a little bit. But
it's also a different game every single time.
No.
When you think about it, there's only so many weapons and so many places where
Yeah,
somebody
yeah. I
can
mean,
get killed. So
But every game has at the end of its possibilities. But for the general thing, it is not the exact same every time. It's not going to be in the same room. You can't make the same decisions. You have to go.
I mean, if that's your definition of that, then on Monopoly, hey, these properties have the hotels this time, and these ones don't.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right.
fundamentally what
That's-
you're
yeah,
describing.
that's- you know,
That's
Fine.
you reached there a little bit. That's a little bit of a reach.
No. I mean, but it is a game that's based on that, though. It's not supposed to be the same
right, but
outcome every time.
at the same time, it's a game that's limited in its scope. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about so and so killed so and so with something in what room. And
But it also plays off the player's decisions.
well,
Just
I
on
think-
how
I
fast
think-
they could try to do something.
Yeah,
Because isn't it
exactly.
like you can only look at the thing once and then that's it, and if you're wrong, you're
Exactly.
out.
Right. Well, but at the same time, you can also, that is a game where it is completely possible to just walk in a room and say, I think it's this. And you've got a chance of winning the game the very first time you make that
Yep.
declaration.
Which also, it needs to be said that nobody else's game can do that.
Why would you
That's
want
a
game
weak
to
point
do
for the
that? That's,
game.
that's such a flaw
Yeah.
that I can end the game
First
in the
turn.
first turn.
Okay,
That's-
so
that's
the,
terrible.
I mean,
the first
and
term
we'll
is
get
great,
into
but
this
it also brings the fact that you could be way down and still have a shot.
How can you be down in Clue? How can you be way down in Clue and not have a
You're
shot
gonna
to
have
win?
defend that.
Okay, no. You're right. It's been a minute since I've played Clue. Give me a break.
Yeah. Okay.
Same here, but as soon as if you get one chance at looking at the thing in the middle, and that's it. Yeah, you can do it round 1. You can do it round 12 if you
Well,
want.
what I meant by down is you haven't had as many chances to guess. And
You have
somebody
one.
else,
You have one ultimate chance to look at that thing. Everybody's got the same amount of chances there.
yeah,
Yeah.
but you still get multiple chances to guess.
No.
Am I not getting that right? I thought you
Well,
had.
you do have multiple chances to guess because
Yeah,
the whole thing
yeah,
there's an
yeah.
investigative property in the game, which is part of the appeal to the game is that you're moving through the house and you're searching for clues. You know, it's not and I think that what maybe you're referring to is you have that one declaration where you say I think it's so and so that did so and so, and if you get it wrong, then, you know you're
out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're out.
You're not
I
out.
haven't played the game forever personally, but it becomes that path between moving through the house and searching for clues, and then trying to make a guess before someone else at the table does, and they beat you out to it. And so part of that, I think, in that game just comes down to somebody else might have an advantage simply because I happen to be standing in a room where I search for a clue and I find that clue before you do.
Yeah,
And it's
and then
not
you
because I
actually
did
get a
something
chance
right.
to
I just happened to be
make-
standing in the parlor and said, "Hey, I'm going to search the parlor," and I find a clue.
You can't always just make said guess whenever
Right.
you want to.
You know, there's not a lot of heavy strategy that's happening there. There's not. I mean, it's
Sometimes
No,
having
no, no.
strategy isn't the best part of the game. Sometimes it's like, so as far as Monopoly, Clue, or Civilization goes, how many times can you play the game, enjoy it, and want to play it again?
sure, and that's a huge thing. And so it's with board games, much like anything else. I have the same thing with books. I have those things that I call mental Twinkies. I want something that's like shitty junk food. It's kind of scratches the itch.
Does
I need
just
a little
enough
snack.
to,
it's just enough
yeah.
to kind of, but it's not real heavy, and I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. And then you have those other games, Civilization, there's so many others. Starfleet Battles is a great choice where it's more layered, it's complex, it's more nuanced, and you've really got to kind of put some effort into.
You want the games that now you're when you're sitting there and when you're playing a game there, and this is just the sense I'm getting from you about how you approach gameplay. You want a game that you invest the time. The focus is on the game,
Right.
whereas with Clue, with Monopoly, there can be a little bit more of a social aspect to it, where we can have a conversation over here off to the side, doing whatever, and the game's still going on. We're unaffected by it.
Right. And if you and I decide to have a conversation about whatever, and then it rolls back around on my turn, I can look at the table very quickly, and my gameplay for the next turn is absolutely not impacted by what's already happened. I'm going to roll some dice, and I'm going to hope to land on a space where I either pass, go and collect $200, or I get a chance card, or I don't have to pay somebody for landing on their hotels. Whereas and there's nothing wrong with those kind of games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of times where you have people playing that's about as deep into board games as they're willing to get.
Yeah.
And then you have other people where it's like, well, I'm being sociable, and so I'll do this game. I'll play this game with you, and it'll be okay. But it's not really. I need something. We some other friends of mine, we call them the meatier games. It's like I've got the game. Well, this is my light snack, and then I have. Well, this motherfucker's the all day buffet. Yeah. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna work on this thing all day and just hammer through it.
I'm gonna call it.
It's a difference. Shush you. It's a difference
No,
between
go ahead and call it. I want to hear what he's calling.
I think we need to vote.
Yeah, you know what? And that we do. And Gail has a special treat there for you. You're not involved in this at all. At all. Zero. Zilch. Nada. But don't fret. I see that redness in your eye.
It's fine.
Neither am I. Neither am Steve.
I know. We have a fourth.
I'm glad you clued into that here. So, based on, and like I said earlier, based on whatever decision you make, based on any detail, any reason, how you approach games, how one of us approach games.
This gets cataloged nowhere, so it really doesn't matter who wins.
But Gail will remind me if he wins.
Yeah.
So
Of course.
That will happen.
So we played a lot of board games growing up. Definitely, it was we ate dinner at the table together. We played board games at the table together. We were definitely into that as a family. We like to really spend time with each other, except when we were playing Monopoly.
yeah,
Which was definitely that table flipper game, which was like, screw you, I'm not paying that much for that hotel. But great game. Great pre-1980s game. It's very well known. People love it, but that's not not my vote. Clue. Loved Clue. Played Clue with all of my cousins. It really sparked my imagination. I was more into actually looking at the board than I was actually playing the game, because I was so interested in the whole haunted mansion type thing, more so than the dynamics of the game. The dynamics of the game to me were like, what do I do now? What can I do? With what and the who? And there's only, I think it was brought up, there's only so many ways that, it's like, there's 6 players and 6 weapons. So how many times can so-and-so kill somebody with so-and-so?
in a certain room.
And there's that too. Civilization. Who really played that game?
I did. And all of my friends.
Total geeks played that game
Yes.
because we never played that game. I didn't know what that was until I moved in with you and all your little dudes. What I like to call.
Can I just point out
What
when
I-
she says all those little dudes, she's referring to my massive miniature collection that I had when I played Warhammer 40K. It's not like I had a stash of dwarves that I was like, hey babe, now that we're married, I'd like you to meet our 400 roommates.
Which basically is what it is, because we've moved them every single time.
fair.
They're like, they never pay the rent, they never pay the bills, they always just take up space.
Now
In
it
fact,
sounds
you
like
had to
she's
give
just
them
holding a
money.
grudge.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I had to buy some paint to make sure that those little dudes look cool. Yeah, screw those little dudes. You and your little dudes. I vacuumed up many of your little dudes. Civilization, though, who played that? Only the geekiest of the geek played Civilization.
I failed to see how that is a disqualifier.
Um,
Are we talking? So is the validity?
Well,
of a
we're
game
not going to
you know
question
what?
judgment
Well,
because it's
okay,
the
I'm
judge's
just-
decision to do
All right,
whatever.
All right, I just.
you know what? You went on for a really long time.
I think she's still pissed off about Access to Allies.
You may be right.
See, all right, I want to call a mistrial because I feel I can't get a fair hearing here, Your Honor.
Hey, now I have said some of the things that I disliked about all of the games so far.
And you've never played Civilization.
I have played Civilization.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have. Way.
I'm skeptical.
Who are you voting for?
So, as far as the positives go, Monopoly. Everybody knows Monopoly. Everybody's played Monopoly. Monopoly will be my kids will play Monopoly. My grandkids will play Monopoly. I'm sure at some point there's going to be a Trump Monopoly.
That
They-
automatically disqualifies the game.
They have a
right
solid
there.
gold edition. I want to say they have a solid gold edition.
So in the
Which-
Trump
which
edition of
might-
Monopoly,
which
do
might
you
as well.
do you just shit on the other players, steal all their money, and then burn the map at the end?
Yes.
No, you get elected the president of the U.S. at the end of the game.
Yes. And then you get to marry their wives. So I think Monopoly is straight out love it, but not my choice. And this is totally me. Doesn't have, in my opinion. Something there's. So, Civilization, have played it. Yes, it probably inspired a lot of other games. You really spoke on and on about how great it was. And I'm sure it was great for you when you were, in your early teens. I'm sorry, but I have to vote for Clue.
Oh, Jesus.
I know.
See, that's just, you picked the weakest of the three.
No. I will play it today. Liked the movie. Our kids will play it. Our kids' will play it. It's good. It gets your imagination going. You think about things. There's a little bit of strategy.
There's
Okay, a lot
there's
of strategy.
There's no strategy in that game.
There's strategy.
So it
There's
does
no
get
strategy in that game.
get your imagination going so much so they made an incredible movie about it.
Was the movie incredible because of the incredible script and the incredible actors in it, or because of the incredible material of the game?
That's where the imagination comes
Yeah,
from.
no, see, I'm going to say that the game was a thin cinematic pastiche that they put a great cast and script on, and the game could have been called, it could have been anything, and
But
that movie would have kicked
they
ass.
had to want to do it.
You know,
I don't think Jonathan Landis, Tim Curry, and all of them, and what isn't Sigourney Weaver in it too?
No, Sigourney Weaver was
No,
not in
it's
that.
Susan Sarandon.
Yes.
Susan Sarandon. They wouldn't have just
Damn it,
chose to
Janet.
do the movie for no reason.
Okay, they
This was
did-
also early
someone-
in a lot of their careers.
Right. Someone didn't look at that board game and go, "Oh fuck, we need to make
This
a movie
is early
about
in
that."
their careers.
yes, but they
Look
did.
up
Early
Tim
80s.
Curry's career.
And
Early
I'll
80s.
tell you what movie it was,
Curry had
and it's
done
one of
bunch
my
before
favorite
this.
movies, Murder by Numbers.
Which no, that's a stellar movie.
Stellar movie, and
But it's not a board game.
no. But if you read the Wikipedia, it was inspired by the game of Clue.
Yeah,
See?
yeah, no.
Inspiration.
This is
all about
this
inspiration.
Is bullshit.
I am willing
Bullshit.
to. I am willing to. You know, because this matters for naught. This is just fun. But I'm really interested in seeing what the modern takes.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move on to modern.
Why don't you just
Because
sit
I'd
there
like
and
to-
there's
I-
still more game
I
going
didn't
on, guys.
realize my early game choice should have been pure fluff and not actually something with some substance.
You would have won if you would have said Milton Bradley Ouija board.
No one did choose the
that's-
Ouija board. That's,
But that's not a board game.
It is a board
That's
game.
not-
Also, another
It's
terrible
a-
movie.
It's a board,
Also
and
another
it was a
terrible
yes
movie.
movie. Right, good
Mm-hmm.
point.
actually, with remakes. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to modern games,
Modern
which we
games.
expect to be more thematically heavy with less mainstream appeal. I hope.
To a certain degree, that's where we get, because we have, I'd say, 3 really different styles of game between all of our picks.
Actually,
Yeah.
they're entirely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm, you know what, since they're all 3 different, if it's not so much this is a better game because it does this or it allows this kind of gameplay, if we get into more like personal stories or something like that, that would be something I'd find more interesting to hear about this
Sure.
one. Okay, so modern games. The one I chose is, I think, was it the first collectible card game?
Yes.
CCG game to come out? Magic the Gathering. It's been around far longer than I ever thought. Sitting there in 7th grade on a playground
It was late
playing it.
80s, early 90s.
Mid-
I wanna
90s.
say, yeah, when that came out. Well,
92, 93.
I was about to say 91, 92 ish
The
is
fact
when I
you're
first
right. The
started
fact
to
it's-
see some of those.
The fact that it's actually still going now.
Yeah.
Like, there was a good point where I thought, oh, it's going to crash and die. It's going to crash
Yeah.
and die. This game has never crashed and died.
It's a game. It's evolved its rules, and it's become very adaptable through the years to always be current. Because, like we're talking about, it's still being played out today. It's still the idea of a CC collectible card game. For those who may not know, is that they'll have a core edition of cards. And the cards will have a special rarity to it. So there will be some cards that you can play with that are very common that everybody gets. There's some that are a little bit more uncommon. And then there are, obviously, the more expensive rares that you can get into that it can do far more than most of the common stuff, in theory. Sometimes the rare ones are really crappy rares. But every, 2-3 times a year, they'll come up with new sets. So there's new cards to play. And they have special tournament styles where you can play one-on-one against other people, and you can only use certain sets of cards, or you can only use a certain number of cards. And the idea is that you have the ability to just build your deck based upon any theme that you want, based upon what you can afford, or whatever kind of cards you can amass. Build a deck, and you play against somebody else who's also done the same. And it was something that was very sociable. Obviously can be very expensive, and I believe, as me and my friends used to call it, cardboard crack,
Right.
was pretty much the way it was.
And I think that is one of the greatest flaws of not just Magic, but anything that falls into the collectible card game category. And I have a personal bit of, I don't want to say animosity. I'm definitely not a fan of CCGs. Now,
But
I know
if you
some
want to save it for the debate there, just so we can
yeah,
introduce
yeah,
stuff.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's-
yeah,
that's
I was
okay,
going to say,
yeah.
but you go into Warhammer, and Warhammer's the same
Oh,
way. just
yeah,
slightly
no,
different.
don't,
Yep.
don't get
Okay,
me started
okay.
on Games Workshop.
So yeah, that's Magic the Gathering. General idea is you're a wizard, and you face off against another player who's also a wizard, and you have all these different spells you can cast, creatures you can bring up, all that fun stuff. Mr. Murd.
I chose a small little game called Settlers of Catan.
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 Is there an official way to
I
enunciate
have
it?
no idea. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The guy's German, so who knows? So Settlers is a game that you build and it's really about who can acquire and build faster through the pieces on the board. The pieces will always change. The map will always change based on what you display as you grow your settlement out. And from there, settlers kind of hit a point in the market when it first released that is widely regarded as maybe the game that's been the most popular since the originals we talked about in our classics. Like, when you bring up Risk, when you bring up Monopoly, when you bring up these games that everyone knows, when you bring up chess itself, as far as the new branch of games goes, it is Settlers of Catan that there is not a single person that does not know what that is. And it kind of branched off from there. Now, the game has also been able to have expansions, so it's expandable. It's differentiated its rules. Some of those have been good, some of those have been bad. I know we're sticking on our core game, but the idea is that it has had that ability to expand, much like your Magic, which is set upon set upon set. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, just on a weird notice, it just happened to have been released on the day of my birthday, the day I was born.
Automatically disqualifies it.
Automatic.
That's a terrible game right there.
Done. We're done.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We're down to 2 games now.
Yep. All right. And so that we know the versus battle here, it's Magic the Gathering versus
what I think is probably one of the best board games released in the last decade, easily. And that is going to be Fantasy Flight's Battlestar Galactica. Mm-hmm. So this is a 2012 release, I believe it was. I was at the Gen Con in Indianapolis when this game first came out, and I remember. So this is when the new Battlestar Galactica series was still airing on Sci-Fi, and when the game was announced, I know that there was a lot of people, myself included, that said, "Okay, game based on a TV show, this is gonna suck."
yeah.
Right. They've tried it before, and it's always shit. And we got to Gen Con. I was there with a few other friends, and we sat down. Fantasy Flight's booth. It was mobbed, and this is before Gen Con's attendance had gotten completely out of hand. And there were just these incredible lines around Fantasy Flight's booth. And we were like, man, there's got to be something to this. And the three of us sat down, and we started to play this game, and we realized that with a Fantasy Flight employee running a demo in the middle of a massive convention after 2 or 3 turns, that we had found something absolutely incredible. So what Fantasy Flight has made with Battlestar is you've got a thematically beautiful game. You know, you've got this really, really interesting universe that it's set in, which is the Battlestar TV show. But you have a game that introduces so many interesting mechanics. The game itself, as we like to say when we play it, the board is trying to kill you. The game itself, if you don't play well, you will lose just to the board. Not even to your competitors, but just to the game, you're going to lose. It introduced... Okay, I don't want to say it introduced a mechanic. So Shadows over Camelot had a betrayal mechanic in it before Battlestar did, but I think Battlestar really put a shine on it, into which it introduced a mechanic in which you have players at your table that you don't know if you can trust. And at first, as the game starts, because of the way the loyalty deck is built, maybe I can trust you, maybe I can't. And I've really got to watch your gameplay, but I know halfway through the game, there's definitely some people at the table we can't trust. And so you've got so much nuance to this game. Characters are limited, or rather, I guess you could say players are limited in what they can do based on the characters that they choose to play and the abilities those characters have. Your turn is limited by the amount of actions you're able to play every turn. Your your choices are very often dictated where you say, well, I really need to do A, but because of everything else that is happening on the board, it's forcing my hand to do B. Mm-hmm. And it's a suboptimal move, but I don't have any other choice. And at that point, everybody else at the table looks at you and goes, well, why did you do that? And so it begins to generate this beautiful layer of conflict in which there's this undercurrent of tension that exists that you don't really find in any other game.
We're trying to all do this together, but
right.
But
what? Are we?
Huh? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can. And so I think that Fantasy Flight absolutely knocked it out of the park. And so you have a game that's spawned, I think, 3 or 4 additional supplements. Again, we're just staying with the core. But the core game at itself has an infinite level of repeatability that you just, I don't think you find with too many other games. I mean, there are other games in which
for as unique of a concept that it is.
Right. You would think it's a one-trick pony. Mm-hmm. That it's like, okay, it's a betrayal mechanic. It's got a thing. No, there's so much that changes every turn, every round, every player that it's. I can't say that I've had too many other gaming experiences as enjoyable as a game of BSG.
Mm-hmm. So getting into the battle part, I'd like to say one positive thing about all of our games. Just get this off the table. It is very clear, and Magic brought people to the table and moved them on from Magic. Settlers brought people to the table that weren't, I'm talking about the non-gamer, and moved them on into more of a gamer.
Well, I think Settlers really shined.
Yes, Settlers.
More than that than either BSG or Magic would.
Yeah, but BSG did the same thing. BSG brought a new group of players together that because they only had seen the show, like, well, and I'll get into this, and then, oh, this is a really good game.
But I think that crossover, there's not,
I've seen all 3 games bring people in and then let them take off from there.
Sure.
I would say to that point, probably the weakest out of all those would be Battlestar, because I don't think that's something that brought people into a game shop specifically. And this might just be my personal experience, but I saw like Magic bring people into like a game shop in order to, because it was specialized enough and it sort of had that community environment growing with it. Same with Settlers, and both Settlers and Magic, where they're positive with that is that you can go to a store like Target and pick it up if you need to.
Sure.
Battlestar, I don't think has that yet, because it's a specialized TV show and a specialized concept.
I don't think it ever will. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll ever have that level of appeal that Catan, as far as what
Target has Battlestar.
Do they? Well, I never go to Target, but I will say that Catan is, aside from Ticket to Ride, probably one of the greatest, what you want to call, gateway games, where you can take a non-gamer and sit down at a table with gamers like us and introduce them into the game, and they will get hooked very quickly. I think Catan is a phenomenal
product. You're right. It's hard pressed to find a better game than doing.
Like I said, I think the only thing that does better than that is Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is so
and it's borderline.
Fun, and
that'd be a long argument.
I think that Catan absolutely shines there. Now, I will say that my greatest complaint about Magic, and why I think it's probably one of the, I think of the 3, it's the weakest choice, is Magic is, and they've addressed this by changing tournament rules. Magic is the ultimate play to win game. When Magic first came out, if you really wanted to shine, it was who could spend the most money to buy the most packs to find that rare. I bought a whole box and I managed to pull a Black Lotus. I mean, that's
that 4-turn kill.
Right. I mean, you're talking. There's all kinds of layers to, am I going to play a red deck? Am I playing a black deck? How do I build my deck? How do I go about, there's some great strategy, but ultimately, and this is my greatest complaint with all CCGs, but especially Magic, who is a forerunner of all this, it's play to win. And I have such an issue with that. And I realize that now in a lot of Magic tournaments, they try and avoid that by they're saying, hey, we're going to do a blind deck thing where you're going to pay and you're going to get X amount of starter packs, and you're going to open it up, and you're going to build a deck, and who can build the best deck and win with that.
Yeah,
and a draft tournament. There's something really to be said to it, But ultimately, that game spawned all of these other CCGs, which all came down to pay to win. And I think that's a huge flaw in the game.
To a certain degree, yes. But I'd say in defense of that, you still have the draft tournaments, which are the only ones when I was trying to get back into Magic. That's what got me back into it, because you understand the concepts of the game, and then you can start to understand the individual cards, because there are thousands of cards that you can get into to try to learn, or just go to those drafts and you just have to learn a small subset of that to really get into it. And you don't have to spend that much money either, because I played against some people who did go out and they bought a deck online that cost them $400 or $500. It got sent to them and they played it, but I could still beat them with like a very cheap deck.
Well, because they didn't understand their cards.
Exactly.
Well,
so you can go out and you can have those winner decks and you can pay to play, but you've still got to have a skill set to know the other cards, know your weaknesses and stuff. There's a lot more strategy with it.
And how do you determine the strengths and the weaknesses? By buying a shitload of cards, reading them, studying them, understanding them, and having this extensive back catalog of things that you can say, oh, this works. Because if I'm a complete new player and somebody just hands me a pack of unopened decks and I've got to open it and put it together, I can tell you, if somebody handed that to me right now, I wouldn't have an idea as to what's going on. But if you, who have this long history and you've bought cards and you know all of these things, you've got a massive, massive advantage.
I have to say the same thing about Battlestar Galactica, though. How many times have we played Battlestar Galactica where we had a newbie and they drawed a Cylon on their first turn and they didn't know how to play the game?
If I could ask, was it a newbie who never saw the TV show?
You know, that I don't know. And are we talking about the 1970s Battlestar Galactica?
Well, no,
are we talking about
we're only talking about the new sci-fi Battlestar, and I will say that is the one thing.
Why?
Well, because the Battlestar Galactica board game has absolutely nothing to do with the 1970s.
But we're talking but we are talking about the draw of people who maybe saw the show that wanted to play the game. I saw the show when in the 70s or 80s, and I saw the show.
Right, and
but you would then see like it's the
show before the board game came out.
Okay, but yes, the board game correlates with the new Battlestar Galactica, but we're talking about how many people saw old Battlestar Galactica, didn't see new Battlestar Galactica, loved the old series, was interested and said, hey, let's buy this board game because...
I think that the number of people that fall into that category is probably one or less. Because you're talking, okay, but then I want you to prove it, because you're talking about someone that only saw a 1970s TV show that aired on primetime television, walked into a gaming shop, looked at something, and said, well, the title says Battlestar Galactica, but I don't recognize any of the people on the cover or the art or anything else, but I'm going to go ahead and buy it for the name alone and then try and learn how to play the game.
My dad.
Your dad never owned a copy of Battlestar Galactica.
Because we did.
And he never played it.
He never
did. I'm calling shenanigans on this right now. This is you're just fishing for bullshit.
In what you were taking a look at what you were describing the game just before we started the battle and stuff like that. If you didn't know the concept of Battlestar Galactica, the TV show itself, trying to explain the concept of the game could be very strange.
And I will admit right now that not discounting Christie's fantastical notions of people watching 1970s TV shows and buying 2012 edition board games, the greatest weakness of Battlestar, and we have any one of us that have played it have seen this, if you are a brand new player and you've never played the game and you don't understand the betrayal mechanic and how things move, and inevitably you're the Cylon player starting out the game, you are at an incredible disadvantage.
Thank you.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. Your point about, I watched the show in the 70s. I don't know where you went with that.
I was making 2 points, and
your first point was invalid. The second point is completely valid, which is that if you don't know how a betrayal mechanic works because you never played Shadows over Camelot, and you didn't watch the TV
what
show,
game were you talking about?
You're at a disadvantage.
I don't know this Betrayal over Camelot. What is this?
Please go sit in the corner. So, So back to
I like your
we got so
I like your
sidelined.
interesting
No,
strategy of attacking the judge.
I wanted this to play out for a little while.
Yeah.
Because it does highlight major flaws in both games.
Not in the game design
No.
itself.
Right.
You're more attacking the community of players to a
Correct,
certain
correct.
degree.
So attack my game design.
Well, you didn't really attack our game design, so why would I attack your game design?
So now attack my player flaw.
I have never successfully played a game of Settlers because I thought it was boring.
Yeah, and that's it. So Settlers is, and it's a Euro that's thematically thin, that is so lightly non-confrontational that you can get non-gamers involved because there's no way to just absolutely devastate them as if I had sat them down and said, hey, I'm going to teach you guys how to play fucking Axis and Allies and murder you in 3 turns.
Right.
Settlers is, and again, my issue with Settlers is the same issue that I have with Monopoly. Oh, there's a Star Trek Settlers, and there's a Star Wars Settlers, and there's a it's sitting on the shelf right now.
Yeah, right.
We
Few feet
have
behind
a
you.
game that is so thematically thin that it doesn't fucking matter what images we put on it.
I say
The
it does.
gameplay doesn't. Please, how does
for
the-
those
how
of
does
us
the
because
theme
I think
change
it's- I
gameplay?
think it's very specialized.
Every
Like, you
time
can't-
Steve says thematical, drink a shot.
You're goddamn right, because a real game should have bucket loads of themes and fistfuls of dice. If you don't
Thematical.
have that, then your game is shit. It's
Thematical.
just shit.
Now you're shit housed.
In defense of Catan, it's not like Monopoly where you can have like a Chicago Bears version of Monopoly. You can have a City of Austin version of Monopoly. You can't do that with Settlers Catan.
I disagree.
Star Trek works because they use the Seafarers of Catan, which is pretty much you expand the main land-based game
But
into the
we're
sea,
not going into,
and
we're
you
not going
instead
into
say space.
expansions. We're not going into
But that,
expansions.
But that's what he's saying.
but if you're saying, yeah,
you can't just skin Catan with anything.
You can skin Catan with damn near anything.
I disagree.
make a City of Austin version of Catan.
Sure. Sure. So you have you can have your City of Austin and your code compliance people, and you can have your Terrytown.
The railroad isn't going to work,
hardcores,
by the
and
way.
you can have you can have shitty Cat Metro, and you can have your slightly 04 hipsters.
Longest
I mean,
congested highway, longest congested road. Can we do that?
Oh,
that's got to be in
easily,
there.
Easily.
Yeah.
There would be a competition for longest.
Highest
So-
priced condo or hotel? Yes.
And as far as the thief, we'd probably have to go with some kind of condo developer is stealing properties away from the
No,
gentrified
it's not the
east
mayor?
side. Well, no, I'm gonna go with property development.
Yeah, okay.
But so Catan is
What are the resources?
the resources would be parking spots, organic grocery stores, and
Some sort of rock or
no,
construction?
a bar with a dog friendly patio. See, fuck you. I just made a City of Austin Catan.
I'm still going to buy one of those just to convert to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair.
See. So I
really
think I've
pushed
just
my point.
sunk your shit right there, man.
Okay,
I'm
I really
just saying,
pushed my point.
Catan
It's so funny.
is so. It's just there's some stuff going on. I know I've got a thief card and I want to trade some wool for fucking lumber. I mean, but there's just once you get past a few gameplays, there's nothing that really wants to make me sit back down and play that game. If somebody gave me an option and said, well, we can play Monopoly or Catan, my answer would be, well, fuck, I don't care. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're not that different.
Fair. No, I mean, there's an agreement there on that. Is it time to vote? I think we vote differently this time.
No, I think we keep voting the same.
Oh, no, see, I've got to judge with a grudge, man. This is not going to
It's gotta
fucking
be-
work
it's
for
gotta
me.
be different. So I think we have to vote. Christy gets a vote, but we have to vote
just-
for one of the other games, and whoever gets the second vote, It could be the same thing. Christy still could be making the choice here.
All right. Okay.
But,
Okay.
All right, Jetter. Do you want to start?
Before we start judging, what exactly are we looking for?
Whichever the argument won you over, whichever personal feelings about it, just whatever you decide. I'm just gonna not put any reason behind it. I'm just gonna say, if I had to choose between Settlers and Battlestar, to play right now, I've got more of a hankering for Settlers than I do Battlestar right now. So I would go with Settlers just because that's what I want to play right now. That's what between everything here that we talked about, what am I enthused about playing right now?
So I'll make a second vote. If I'm going to play one of these games, I'm going to choose Magic the Gathering or Battlestar Galactica. I think it's obvious for me. It's Battlestar.
It's fair. I mean, my vote is Magic. Again, it's enjoyable. And I moved away from collectibles, but there are some not collectible, the living card games is what they call them. It's just when I go out and buy a deck and you buy a deck, I know that you and I have exactly the same kind of cards, and I think that's a beautiful offshoot of what Magic started. Magic is this juggernaut and this beautiful thing, but for me, just because of theme and because of all of the layers and the nuance and the raw kind of aggressive emotion that the game brings out, Battlestar is an absolute must play for anybody that plays games, and that's my vote.
Oh, you can't vote for yourself.
No, you can't vote for myself.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
you got to pick
confused.
one of the other two.
Well,
yeah, sorry.
Then I'm going to go with Magic because I would rather just like bury my head in a pile of sand and wait for the tide to roll in than play Catan.
So, Christy, guess what?
Deciding vote. Whatever your reason, whatever it be.
So again, sorry, love, but Catan snooze fest. I've tried it board game. I've tried with expansions, and I've tried on a iPod app or whatever, and I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't want to get it because it's snooze. Magic the Gathering. Living in Austin is awesome because of everybody that's kind of like-minded in Austin. And whatever city has, or name another city that has a place that has an entire place where you can just go and play Magic the Gathering like Pat's. It's amazing.
Right.
The community that it gathers, people, they can be the dweebiest of dorks and still find a place that they can come together on a common ground, and that's great for for people, for the community, and that I would say Magic the Gathering definitely brings people together in that way. Mm-hmm. Now, I love a good game of Battlestar Galactica, but I know that there is tension and there's anxiety associated with playing Battlestar Galactica. When I look at my card and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm a Cylon. My butthole puckers so tight.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing.
Oh shit, I know that my husband is looking at me right now. He sees the look in my eye and he knows that I'm a Cylon. He's going to put me in a brig. This game is going to suck, but it's oh so good at the same time. I hanker to play a game of Battlestar Galactica. And if that's what we're looking for in a game, is what we're hankering to play right now, like if we had all three games right now in front of us, what would we play? It would be Battlestar Galactica.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Awesome.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Decision made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd forgotten.
I can't complain about any of these decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And I had completely forgotten until you brought up Pat's. Yeah, I had gone there quite a few times. And actually, right when I was getting into it, the robbery happened there.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. That was huge.
Yeah.
They lost
It-
tens of thousands of dollars, which is mind-boggling to me that you have a game, a card game that nerds like us play, and there are cards that have such massive value attached to them.
I
think
have
that's
to
correct.
say, it was a hard decision between Magic the Gathering and Battlestar Galactica. I know so many people from all walks of life that play Magic the Gathering, and it's cool to see and meet all these people who do play Magic the Gathering, because it's not just a stereotypical game player game. It's all walks of life. It's all different kinds of people.
You don't see like the Sheldons and stuff like that of Big Bang Theory only
Right.
playing the game. Like you
Yeah.
see,
It's all different kinds of people, and I think if you're looking for a game like that's amazing to find a huge community of people who want to play that game, which is really great. But at the same time, Battlestar Galactica has some really deep feelings associated with it. When you're playing it, you're in it, and you really like it's
potentially a friendship ender.
it
That's such a great game. I mean, there's only
could
one other
be.
game that I think is up there is Westeros. The Battle for Westeros. I mean, that is a game that will absolutely devastate friendships. You could sit down with your 4 best friends, and when you leave, you want to shoot every other person there in the face. And I think that's what makes Battlestar so great, is because if I get a card and I'm like, man, I'm a human at the beginning, and I'm going to do my best to make sure the Battlestar gets somewhere, and then halfway through the game, I'm a Cylon, and it's like, now I'm going to put the screws to all you guys. Or maybe
but
I
it's
stay
hard.
human. And
there's a
just
lot of
so
feelings
much.
involved.
That's
You really
Right. Yeah.
take it in personally.
Yeah.
It's and then when it ends, like, you want to play it again because you either want the humans to win, or you're like, screw those humans,
die
toasters
milk bags.
forever.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing about it. Is there's just so much infinite replayability to the game. Every game is different.
true. Pretty much, same with Magic. Same with pretty much, well, most of the games here.
Yeah.
Right. Not
half.
Catan. Catan's the same
Yeah.
goddamn thing. Clay for wool, build a road, rag, same old shit.
I never even got that far. I
Yeah.
was like,
I mean, I'm sorry,
Sorry,
Catan's
Will.
right up there with
Oh wow.
Carcassonne and Agricola. I
Yeah.
would rather sand my dick off than play those games.
Oh
yeah.
wow.
And
see-
by the way, I didn't even know that it was Agricola for a long time. I kept calling it
Oh
Agricola.
yeah, no, I still call it Agricola just to piss off people that
you
like the
know,
game.
And yes, people that like the game will definitely tell you it's Agricola. I don't even know, but yeah.
Agricola, like
Agricola.
the
Agricola.
farming version
Right.
of Coca-Cola.
Exactly. Yes. I first to plant the Pepsi wins.
I also don't like Agricola.
See, but you like Catan. How is that fucking possible?
Because it's
I'm
Catan
surprised-
has, like a moment in my time.
I'm surprised he didn't do like Cards Against Humanity or something like that. Honestly,
Well, now Gail and I had an interesting conversation when we were kind of setting this up. Gail thought that
Yeah.
one of the things that we could get into, and this is kind of the aside, is best card game, because he said, well, let's talk about one of the categories we could take. You could say best war game, best card game, things like that, and that's interesting. So Cards Against Humanity, it's a fucking one-trick pony.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, maybe a two-trick pony. You play it a couple times, depending on the people you're playing with. But I mean, ultimately, it's like, okay, grandma's giving grandpa's ashes a blowjob with a midget stripper or some shit. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, okay,
There's 2 card games that take Magic to. One is Plague of Pleasures.
and I would argue that's one of my all-time favorites.
And the other is a very simple game, but it's different every time you play it, and it's called Uno.
Yes.
And it brings a like, it's not bringing the. You want to talk about Battlestar bringing enemies? Uno pisses off families.
Right.
They stop playing. I mean, more so than even the table flipping of Monopoly.
And I guess
Like,
that's fair.
Uno
but
brings
for
a
me,
fucking vengeance
I don't.
to the
I don't
game
look at.
for
I guess I
whatever
don't.
reason.
I don't consider it because it's for me at least where I am now as a gamer. I want something that is thematically interesting.
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're playing along.
Yep.
Right. I'm sorry. It's kind of my thing. And
Say it
and
again.
there are
Say it again.
there are Euros
Thematically.
that are really cool games that maybe lack the confrontational style of if people want to call it to use the shitty title Ameritrash games, but I think that Uno cool, it's that easy intro game, and I think the reason why it carries a broad appeal is because it lacks theme.
Yeah. But at the same time, it does bring the vengeance.
That as gamers, no, you're right. But I think as gamers, we're looking for more than just confrontation. We want
that's
we
the
want
level...
something that sparks, as Christy said about Clue. We want something that sparks imagination. That it puts you into a mindset of what it is you're playing.
Thank you for validating that. For sure.
Sure.
So
You're welcome.
if we had gone.
winner.
If we had gone best, because now like we get talking, I'm like, we could have gone like the category of like best game that will definitely flip the table at the end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Best game that you can
That's
play
gonna
like
be a
at
new
Thanksgiving
one.
with the family.
Yeah.
Well, and that's Ticket to Ride, because I've done it. Best.
Sparkle.
Well, Thanksgiving. Okay. Well, sure.
And not Power Grid?
Yahtzee.
Not Power Grid. No.
No.
Okay.
Now, Ticket to Ride, yes. Farkle, and again, Farkle is one of those great, fun, inoffensive. Farkle is a game you can play when you're camping. Farkle is a game where you can just play. I'm sitting at a bar. But I mean, yeah,
I would go against Yahtzee, but just because when people start rolling lucky in Yahtzee, you just naturally start getting angry at them.
Yeah. Well, Farkle's no different. I would say Farkle's not terribly different from that. But yeah, I mean,
Best
there's so many
dice
different-
game.
Best dice game. Shit. Warriors. That's pretty solid.
Yeah, Zombie Dice is
Yeah, I
fun.
was going to
Dice
say
is good.
zombie dice.
Or Chupacabra.
yeah.
Again, and that's one of those. And there's something to be said. Best dice game that you can carry in your pocket and go play at a bar, because that's a huge thing
Farkle.
for me. Is Farkle or Zombie Dice. I could sit down at a bar and we can all sit around and have a beer and throw some dice and have a good time.
Right. But,
And I'm not.
But zombie
3 hours
dice,
invested into it.
Yeah.
Go back to one of your original arguments on another game is put another skin on it and it's the same fucking game.
Absolutely.
Which is Cthulhu dice, zombie dice, whatever.
Yeah,
No, it's the
Cthulhu,
same.
It is. I will tell you right now, Cthulhu Dice and Zombie Dice, two radically different games, because there's a decision-making process in Cthulhu Dice that doesn't exist in Zombie Dice.
Same thing.
It's one process.
It's not.
It's rolling some dice
No. It's
and there's rules.
yeah. She's so off base.
I think this is where we wrap.
Yeah, that's what it's been a long podcast. So because we got into it, it wasn't boring. Like it just all of a sudden it's like, whoa, look at the time, and it's like, shit, hours have passed so far. Yeah, and we only got to touch on 2 topics. Like
So,
that's
yeah.
the
We
didn't
that's
even get
the-
to music.
Comment
I know.
Comment if you want Steve and Christy to be on this podcast again. We want you to subscribe. Definitely.
Well, don't
Tell us what you want us to talk about.
Don't promote us just yet. It's a promotion there for you guys right now. So social media, you guys are all on brewtorium.com.
www.thebrewtorium.com. We have a Brewtorium Facebook page.
Could you spell it out just so that way?
Yeah, BREWTORIUM, Brewtorium. And you can find us on Facebook. You can find our regular webpage. On our webpage, you will find links to our Instagram account and our Twitter account.
And we are having some crowdfunding opportunities coming up as well. So if you want to see local brewers, local breweries really succeed, and people in your community really doing what they love to do, which is brew beer and make great food and have a great place for you to come visit, please visit our website.
Please.
And we will soon have a little link where you can either donate or buy a picnic table or actually brew with our brewer, or have a chef's dinner with our chef Dave Arcos, who is amazing. Comes from a long line of chefs. He was taught by a couple of different people, but he definitely cooked at or was a chef at different places.
He's been a chef at some pretty successful restaurants, and so
Sala and Betty, and also Hayes City Store,
yeah.
amongst others.
Cool. And on to Mr. Shady Justice.
You were talking about last words. Good battle this time. I won with Clue.
This time?
I won with Clue. Clue was not the one I thought I'd win with out of the two choices I made. Settlers of Catan
I'm
is
still
clearly
calling shenanigans on that first round.
clearly the much better game. But
No.
there's the voter. Yeah,
I
that's
knew
all my last words.
I
What's
knew
your
he
last
couldn't
words?
get away with his last words without bragging. Just a smidge there. Just a little.
Uh,
I don't know. It's humorous to me. Go for it.
Last words: support your local craft breweries. They are the people that are making things you're happy, and listen to doom metal. That's all.
Why doom metal?
Why doom metal? It's a beautiful outshoot of things that Black Sabbath started in the 70s. It's lyrical. It's heavy. See, we need to have a whole other podcast just on this. But there's so many. In fact, do both. Support craft beer and listen to doom metal by listening to a band called Chemists out of Denver. The head brewer from True Brewing, which makes some absolutely stellar stuff, is also the guitar player and vocalist for Chemists, and they are fucking incredible. Listen to that.
All righty. Well, that was a good podcast. I enjoyed. And now to do the promotion part. So if you're tuning out, I'll just sprinkle in a few meows here and there just to make it a little bit better. You can find us on the Instagram and on the Twitter. Our handle is @Jet Theory Radio. That's JETT Theory Radio. Meow. If you can find us on YouTube, Jet Theory Radio is on there, and also on our Meow website, you can do jettheoryradio.com. Do we have any final meow words from me? No, meow. James, send us home.